starting the webinar. And we are live.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to call the September 21st meeting of the Planning Commission to order. It is 7:01. Well, so we have some opening remarks from our recording secretary. Nope, take it back.
City Attorney.
City Attorney.
Thank you,
Good
Chair.
evening, Ms. Boone.
Hi, good evening, Chair Kuznick and the rest of the commissioners. Okay, here it goes. Prior to roll call, I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that the governor has issued executive orders relaxing the requirements pertaining to remote meetings under the Brown Act. The executive orders authorize this planning commission to hold public meetings by teleconference during the COVID-19 crisis. I previously went over these specific provisions of the Brown Act that have been temporarily amended or suspended in order to allow for this meeting to take place by teleconference. And this meeting will comply with all such provisions. Madam Recording Secretary, it would now be appropriate for you to conduct roll call, after which I would ask the chair to recognize me in order to confirm certain matters for the record. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. All right, we have Commissioner Edwards.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Marks.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Alpert.
Here.
And Chair Kuznick.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Boone, part two.
All right, thank you again, Chair Kuznick. I would now like to ask the chair, the vice chair, and the other commission members 3 questions. Rather than ask you to respond separately to these questions, I will ask all 3. And if the answer is yes to all 3, please say yes and physically raise your hand. Question number 1, can you hear me well? Question number 2, have you been able to hear all previous speakers, including the roll call, clearly? And question 3, are you satisfied based on facial or voice recognition or otherwise that everyone here representing themselves to be a commission member is actually the person they are representing themselves to be? Sorry. All right, I am looking for hands and yeses, please.
Yes.
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 Sorry, Corey, I think you're muted.
Yes, apologies.
Sorry, Commissioner Edwards. Thank you. Thank you all. Seeing all hands raised, and the record should reflect that I have received affirmative answers from each commission member present to all 3 questions, that all commission members have indicated they are able to hear each other and these proceedings clearly, and no commission member has expressed doubt that each and every commission member participating by teleconference is in fact the commission member they are representing themselves to be. And finally, I would now like to advise the chair and the commission members and the recording secretary that any votes taken during the teleconference portion of this meeting must be taken by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we turn to Ms. Nylander, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one
one
nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. And we are now moving to item 4 on the agenda, public comments or written communications. So do we have any comments written or any speakers who would like to address public comment on items that are not on the agenda?
We did not receive any written communication, but as a reminder, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to speak when public comment is being taken.
Very good.
And at this time, it would be appropriate to comment on any item not included in tonight's agenda. All right, so I don't see any hands raised. So Chair Kuznick, if you'd like to open and maybe close the public hearing or the public comment.
Great, I will do that. So I'm going to open public comment for items not on the agenda. And do we have any?
Nope.
Seeing none, then I will close public comment on items not on the agenda. All right, excellent. Thank you so much. All right, so let's move on in the agenda here. Turn my page. Okay, item 5, additions and revisions. We have none. Item 6, the consent calendar. There are no items. Moving on to item 7, approval of the minutes. Item 7.1, the minutes from September 7th, our regular planning commission meeting. Is there a
Chair,
discussion?
I'll
Go
move,
ahead.
I'll move to adopt the minutes of the September 7th Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you, Vice Chair Albert. Is there a second on approving the minutes?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Wallace.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Hmm.
We had mover Vice Chair Alpert,
Aye.
seconder Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards,
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
and Chair Kuznick.
Aye,
Thank you. Item 7.1 passes.
very good. Thank you so much. All right, move on to item 8, continued items after closing. There are none. Item 9, continued items. We are moving on to item 9.1, a continued public hearing on City Village, Bishop Ranch 6 development proposal, hearing number 4, and we have a staff report from Ms. Yee, Senior Planner.
Thank you and good evening. I have a PowerPoint to share this evening. While I'm pulling that up, Jennifer, if you could just bring in the applicants into the room, that would be great.
I just promoted Jerry and Denise. Is there anyone else who needs to be brought in?
There should be Kevin, Ibrahimi.
Oh, yep.
I think Robert Freed may also want to join the panel as well.
Okay. I don't see Kevin unless maybe he's, oh, there he is. I see him all the way at the top. Okay. And then you said Robert?
Yes.
Robert Freed. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So hopefully you can see my screen. Great. All right, so I'll go ahead and get us started tonight. Tonight is the 4th public hearing on the City Village development application. Before you this evening, we are requesting a continuation of the public hearing to receive additional public testimony, to close that public testimony, and to provide direction to staff. In your staff reports this evening is a attached resolution for your consideration. And if the specific plan is recommended for approval, we would recommend continuing the Planning Commission public hearing on the development applications to October 19th. Just again, to get familiar with the property, we are talking about a 31-acre site, Camino Ramon, Norris Canyon Road, and Executive Parkway as the boundaries of the property. Just a reminder, the property is the entirety of Bishop Ranch 6, which is a 31-acre site, currently has an office complex. The proposal includes a 404-unit residential development, along with a 2-acre park site and a quarter-acre tot lot. There's no affordable housing proposal as part of the application, along with a specific plan amendment. There is a development plan, major subdivision, architecture review, tree removal, and environmental review. And so the focus of tonight's meeting is really for us to make sure that the commission has the information on the North Camino Ramon specific plan amendment so that action may be taken if so moved. Just to recap on the amendment of the specific plan, there is in your staff report this evening, attachment A, Exhibit A, which details out the proposed changes to the specific plan. Some of the highlights of those changes include the amendment to the currently Bishop Ranch mixed-use land use designation and replacing that designation with a mixed-density residential designation that would allow for 14 to 30 dwelling units per acre. There's also associated definitions, guidelines, standards, descriptions, and maps that are associated with that project site. And so those would also be part of the amendment for internal consistency. And then, as mentioned, there is an update to the inclusionary policy where it ultimately would align with the city's inclusionary housing ordinance. And so although we're talking about the specific plan amendments today, I thought it would just be helpful to see the site map and then its relationship to Block G in the specific plan. In your staff reports, you'll find a overlay of the proposed site plan onto site G, just to give you a better reference as to where where that improvement's going to go in relation to the current specific plan. And as with all specific plan amendments, the city's Measure G requires that a minimum of 3 public hearings are held before the Planning Commission and the City Council. Specific plan amendments require a 4/5 vote of the City Council after a recommendation in favor of such an amendment by the Planning Commission, also by a 4/5 vote. As far as the California Environmental Quality Act, there is a requirement for Sql Analysis. A previous North Camino Ramon environmental impact report was prepared in 2012, and an addendum to that EIR was prepared to analyze the project's environmental impacts. That was attached to your staff report and attached by reference in your resolution Exhibit B. There's also, as part of the analysis, a response to comments memo that was prepared addressing comments received on the addendum, and that's attached as Exhibit C. So I'm not going to go through the long history of the project review, but as you can see, there have been a number of study sessions and meetings associated with the project and the specific plan changes. Tonight will be the 4th public hearing on the project itself. Once the commission takes action, subsequent to that, will then require the City Council public hearings. And as mentioned in the staff report, this project consists of 2 project processing tracks. The first tract, which is what we're focused on this evening, is the proposed specific plan amendment and the associated Sql analysis related to that specific plan amendment. And that requires a recommendation from the Planning Commission and then a final determination from the City Council. The second tract is the development applications for project entitlement. That typically follows standard development review that would be approved by the Planning Commission. So to focus on the comments that have been received on the specific plan amendment, this next couple of slides provides a summary of the comments that have been received thus far. On the topic of the Sql analysis and response to comments, at the September 7th meeting, there were requests for additional clarification on the Sql analysis conducted for the specific plan amendment. As mentioned, there is a response to comments memo that was prepared by the city's Sql consultant. Attachment A, Exhibit C is that memorandum, along with a analysis matrix and additional information to address comments received on biological and cultural resources mitigation measures. So as we mentioned at the September 7th meeting, addendums has been prepared and analyzed the impacts of the project to Sql. And has been determined to be appropriate and meets the requirements in terms of Sql law. And then the second comments regarding the specific plan text changes and general plan consistency. Additional information was requested on the proposed specific plan amendment and its consistency with the current plan and the general plan. In your staff reports is attachment A, Exhibit A, which is a matrix of all of the proposed amendments to the specific plan, and a description of its general plan consistency with the project. So in that table is a list of 23 proposed changes proposed by the applicant to the North Camino Road specific plan. Staff has provided some additional comments regarding its adequacy and to general plan consistency. And we're also making some recommendations to make some edits to 3 of those text proposals, numbers 8, 20, and 21A. In addition to those 3 proposed text changes, staff is also recommending the addition of text change number 24, which would recognize the establishment of the walking district. And then the last comments received on the specific plan amendment was the project's relationship to the proposed walking district. On September 7th, there was a request for additional information on how the project aligns with the walking district master plan. And as the commission is aware, the plan is currently being prepared. Once that plan is adopted, it will serve as a guide to assist in designing streetscapes and the street systems within that walking district. The project has addressed the draft goals of the master plan and includes streetscapes and pedestrian connections throughout the project. And although today we are not considering the development applications, what staff is recommending is that we consider incorporating into the North Camino Ramon specific plan language that would recognize the establishment of a future walking district and policy related to projects and future projects in the walking district area. And then with the development application comments, there were comments received related to the affordable housing plan with Street A and open space comments related to the project. Those are comments that we would recommend discussion at a subsequent planning commission hearing scheduled for October 19th. And so just to recap tonight, we would recommend continuing to receive public testimony and feedback from the commission. And if appropriate, we've included a resolution for your consideration recommending approval of the specific plan amendment and the addendum to the EIR. And then in addition to that, continuing the Planning Commission public hearing on the development applications to October 19th. Then just a reminder, because we do have a specific plan amendment, any of the entitlement applications, no action can be taken on those until the specific plan amendment is adopted by the City Council. So with that, that concludes my staff report this evening. I know the applicant wanted to share some comments tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission might have right now, or we can save those until after.
Commissioners, do you have questions for Ms. Yee before we hear from the applicant?
I have questions, but I can wait until the applicant talks.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wallace.
I do as well, but again, I will wait until later
Okay.
on.
All right, very good. I think that seems to be what we would like to do. So as we would like to hear from our applicants.
Good evening, Chair Kuznick and Planning Commissioners. I'm Denise Cunningham, VP of Development with Summerhill Homes, and I'd like to thank you again for your time this evening, and also thank staff for their continued efforts. We also have Robert Freed, Summerhill CEO, Kevin Ebrahimi, the Senior VP of Development, and Jerry Engen with Sunset Development, and we are all available to answer questions tonight. And I want to thank staff again for their detailed staff report, and they provided great information on the proposed revisions to the specific plan. And I just wanted to reiterate that other than changing the affordable housing program to align with the new inclusionary housing ordinance and potentially including a reference to the walking district, which Summerhill didn't introduce, but we do support that. The revisions are really limited to the project site specifically. As such, no impacts to the specific plan area other than Bishop Ranch 6. For example, redesignating the site as mixed density residential to allow for a diversity of housing types, provide some development standards specific to the project site, and also identifying the location of the 2-acre park, also including a linear open space, and revisions to the range of density, again, consistent with the general plan. So again, these are all limited to the City Village project site. And although this hearing is focused on the specific plan amendment, we'd like to take this time to acknowledge and also thank you and let you know that we appreciate all the comments we've received to date. And we look forward to coming back before the Planning Commission on the October 19th to address the project level questions that were raised at the previous meeting on the 7th. So thank you again for your time this evening.
Other applicant members wishing to address us before we get started? Okay. Thank you so much. So at this time, I just want to make sure, commissioners, do we have any questions before I open the public comment? Is that what's going to be my next step? Seeing no one, go ahead, Commissioner Wallace.
Okay, I had some softball questions for Ms. Yee.
Okay.
First question, what's the two main differences between the proposed medium density residential district and the medium mixed use, medium density existing district?
I think the biggest change is the density range. The current density range in the medium density residential, I believe, is 20 to 40 dwelling units per acre. Also, the other change to that is that with Bishop Ranch mixed use, there is a ability for the property to have both a mix of commercial and residential uses on site. And so the mixed density would be solely just a residential density. I think your question was, again, back to medium density residential. It's really primarily the range. As you can see in the text changes, the design guidelines do show what those what the design guideline changes would be. There's references to street wall heights and other text changes that are specific to that mixed density that would be different from medium density, but primarily it's the density range that's allowed within that district.
Well, basically the density range, what you're doing is you're lowering the minimum from 20 units per acre to 14, right?
Correct.
Okay. Other than that, basically you're eliminating mixed use in the MDR.
That's right.
And for the multifamily mixed use, that doesn't preclude a mix of housing types on that zone property, does it?
It doesn't. It recognizes that there are a variety of uses that could be supported on site. Ground floor uses that could include office, studio uses, and a variety of commercial and recreation uses.
Well, basically, we could take what's proposed for BR6 and put it on the mixed multifamily medium density sites and duplicate it as long as we bumped up the minimum dwellings per acre to 20, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Sure. We could basically duplicate what's proposed for BR6 on the areas that are now zoned for multifamily mixed use, as long as the density was up to 20 dwelling units per acre.
That's right. You could certainly do that, but because the mixed density residential is just proposed for 14, you would have to recognize that potential change to the range.
Right. A second softball question. Where would we find the density ranges for each of the residential housing types in the specific plan? Are they just in the design guidelines or are they someplace else?
The density ranges, there are descriptions as part of each of the of the descriptions for the land uses. So chapter 4, for example, multifamily mixed use, the density range is spelled out in the definition of the use.
Okay, that's for the multifamily mixed use, which goes 20 to 50. With
Right.
respect to the medium density and the high density, the only definitions are in the chapter 7, which would be the design guidelines.
Right.
Told you they were softballs. All right, that's the only 2 questions I had.
Thank you. Other questions? Easier or more difficult? Oh, yes, go Corey. Thank you very much. I saw your hand.
Thank you. I have 2 questions also for Ms. Yee. One, I wanted to just clarify, is a vote in favor of the specific plan amendment as it relates to the location of the park binding concerning the location of that proposed park?
So the specific plan amendment would include just a change to the land use map that shows the medium mixed density land use swap from BRMU to mixed use. It would identify as part of that a park site at the southern edge of Executive Parkway. Because there's existing park site that's on the block G that goes through the middle of that, because there will no longer be a park on that on the midpoint of that parcel, it would now then move to the southern end. With specific plan, it would identify that land use on that property. The commission still it's in their purview as part of the entitlements, whether or not to ultimately approve a application that it felt met the specific plan standards that would be adopted tonight.
Okay, thank you. And then I have another question for you. If we amend the specific plan to reduce the permitted density on this site, and the proposed project is either not approved or doesn't proceed, and we later have a higher density project proposed either by Summerhill or a different developer, we would need to further amend the specific plan to bring the density level back up. Is that correct?
Right. So if that new proposal were to want to exceed 30 dwelling units per acre, because that would be the current range that we're currently setting. If that proposal were to request a higher density beyond 30 dwelling units per acre, you may potentially have to amend the plan unless perhaps there's a density bonus request that's part of that entitlement application. In circumstances such as that, where a request is being made for a density bonus and would increase the overall density on site, it wouldn't be subject to a specific plan amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Marks. You're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cindy, I'm very encouraged by something that you briefly discussed regarding the walking district. I spent a good part of the weekend developing what I thought would be a rationale for a placeholder within the North Camino Ramon specific plan, laying out just some basic description of what the city was intending to do and what might be included in it. It sounds like that's exactly what number 24 would be about. Am I correct?
That's right. So based on the comments that we received on September 7th and throughout the public hearings, there was a number of comments regarding how does this project relate to the walking district, especially given that the specific plan currently does not recognize that there is a walking district. And as part of that, staffs took those comments and evaluated how best to kind of bridge that gap, given that there isn't a currently adopted walking district. And our best go at how to address that is found on page 44 of your packet. It's recognizing the establishment of the walking district, adding a reference to the walking district master plan. So specific language that identifies that the city is developing this walking district. And then a policy that specifically addresses that developments would need to consider and implement the walking district goals and design guidelines. So you can read the language of that policy on page 44.
I did, and I'm fully supportive of it. And I'm very happy that you are doing that. Have you developed the actual language that you intend to insert in the plan, or is that a future staff effort?
So right now, that is the extent of the summary text. If there's additional language that you think that we might need to add for background purposes, I think that would be helpful. It may not necessarily be something that that staff could work on tonight if there's some additional robust language, but I think at least on the policy side, if there's some specific tweaks there, we would want to discuss those tonight.
If I have any, I would send them to you. I certainly don't expect us to develop any changes tonight. I greatly appreciate that change, and primarily for the reason that what is included in a general plan or a specific plan has much more authority and requirement about it than a standalone advisory plan. And the concern I've had all along about the walking district is if it isn't in the general plan or the specific plan, it's easy for a property owner to say thank you, but no thank you. And you end up with an inconsistent walking district in terms of its design. But this looks like it solved the problem. And again, I'm very pleased that you're doing this. That's all I wanted to find out. Thank you.
Other questions? I have a quick clarifying question. Yeah. This is on packet page 27. I noticed when I was reading a couple of times it referenced city center, but I wondered, this was the First Amendment. When the amendments reference city center, does that also include city walk? Because the language sounded like it did, but I know that they are different projects.
Sorry, just give me a minute just to get that page. And I believe that this particular part of the document is really related to the history of the project. So just I'm going to flip to the actual page so that I have the full context of what's before and after that section. Maybe while I'm doing that, I don't know if Lauren, to put you on the spot, I know he put that.
It does talk about the history in the sense that after the city center project was approved in mid-2000s, the city began the North Camino Ramon specific plan. And that's sort of the background for the history of North Camino Ramon. That's in that context that city center is mentioned.
Yeah, it was in the context at the time in terms of trying to coordinate between the goals of the North Camino Ramon specific plan and the entitlements related to city center.
But it does not then imply city walk, which is a different project.
Well, the original text did not include city walk because it didn't exist at the time.
Well, because the opening statement is revise the text to reflect the future development of City Walk project, and so that was part of my confusion in the terminology. Or just to clarify. Okay. Other questions or clarifying
Right, I
before
do.
we, go ahead,
Yeah.
Commissioner Alpert.
Thank you, Chair Kuznick. Ms. Yee, this is really more of a question of process. Assuming we may do the approval, what would be presented to the City Council? And specifically, there are a number of references to updated diagrams, tables, references that will be ultimately completed. Will they get that as part of their approval, or will we, or when will those updated diagrams catch up with the text changes that we're discussing tonight?
Those maps are typically done after the adoption of the specific plan amendment by the City Council. Because those specific, most of the changes are text related, but the diagrams that would eliminate street E and street F, because they specifically call those out as part of the change, the only changes that would happen to the maps would be specifically related to the text that follows. And so it's really primarily more for internal consistency purposes. The biggest change to the maps is really that land use drawing that I showed you previously, where the pink color currently shows BRMU, and that will then change to MDR. That's the greatest change. Then the description of that MDR would then be inserted into the document. And then if other parts of the plan shows BRMU, we'll change the labels from BRMU to MDR. So that's typically something that we do internally consistent once we make the changes after the council has adopted them.
Okay, and so I think implied in that is the text should be sufficient for them to understand the scope of the changes that are being contemplated, and they won't need diagrams to make sure it's clear, in your opinion?
Unless they, are requesting that of us before adoption. But typically speaking, because the changes are primarily text changes, those generally don't come until the staff has had a chance to update those documents.
Great, thank you for clarifying.
Any other questions to clarify at this point before we move on to the opportunity for public comment? Seeing none, I will then ask Ms. Nylander if I'm going to open public comment on this topic, and we will see if we have any. I think we're going to get advisory about public comments as well before.
Yes, I'll just give a quick reminder. If you'd like to speak on item 9.1 City Village, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone if you are calling in. And each person will have 3 minutes in allotted time for their comment. So we did not receive any written communication items. So what I'll do is take a look at our attendees list and see if anyone has their hands raised. And it looks like we do have one hand raised, so we can start here. Let me go ahead and I have Jim Blickenstaff. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk, but I'm still going to pull up the timer. So give me just a moment and I'll let you know when we're ready for you. Oh, perfect.
I have it, Jen.
Thank you so much. All right, Jim, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hello, commissioners. Jim Blickenstaff. I had a couple observations. I wanted to make sure you understood what I was thinking. The specific plan can be quite constraining because obviously it's specific, and then the decisions you make in the next 2 weeks or so, or whatever, will be constrained by the parameters of the specific plan. And that ties in again with an ongoing theme of the city in recent approvals of not setting aside sufficient park acreage. I understand there'll be a minimum gain in park acreage with this project right now. And that could be multiplied over and over again if this sets a standard or precedent for similar projects as we go forward with converting commercial properties. So it's going to get multiplied and increase the difficulties with adequate park acreage for the influx of thousands more people. And that's a direct quality of life issue. So I'd like to see the commission be somewhat careful in tying their hands to some degree by focusing on a specific plan that allows only the 2-acre park. Because if you decide with the amount of people coming in at a later meeting before the final decision on the plan that you'd like to see 4 acres somewhere or even more at 6, ideally, then perhaps this specific plan that you would tend to want to approve tonight would forbid that, would keep that from happening. So I think that's something you want to understand if you're getting limited maybe beyond what you need to by the current specific plan as it's proposed. It seems like it was modified to some degree to be more compatible with the city walk concept, and that was encouraging. And by that same token, I think it can be adjusted to allow the commissioners more flexibility to look at a plan, a project plan in the context of a specific plan that allows the flexibility the Planning Commission needs to make sure it's a better project for the community and the people, even the people that will be moving in. Because right now, converting to commercial to 1,200 residential is going to increase the park need. And then when the density of housing is such, the park need goes up even more because there's less green space around the park, around the housing. So there's a double need here to make sure you pay attention to parks. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Jim. Okay, I'll give it just a second or two longer just to see if we have any other hands go up here. We have one more speaker, it looks like. Paul Bickmore. And you can speak whenever you're ready.
Hello, I'm Paul Bickmore, and I heard about this. I used to work on this site. This is where my office was before I moved down now at PG&E, at least in normal times. And the thing that I'm kind of worried about from what I've gathered in terms of discussion is lowering that minimum density because we really need more housing. I work with people who, when we go back in person, are going to be commuting from Sacramento. And when I was at this place, it was kind of the same. It was just, people could not afford to live anywhere near here. I'm not going to be able to live anywhere near here as it is when I have kids. It's just that concern of permanently lowering, or at least without any, additional actions, lowering the amount of housing. I'd really like to see more housing here, just because of just all those struggles with people that I know who commute, who are super commuters, and the affordability issue, and the ability to support more transit there, since the commuter buses were well used, but that was about it. And just not permanently lowering the potential, because we need really a lot of housing. I like the fact that it's there's cross streets, because you couldn't get anywhere across these enormous blocks with some of the fences. There was a little bit in one of the parts of the this area where you could kind of cut through, and but I just really like to see more housing, and thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. All right, we have a third speaker. It looks like Joyce Carr. You can speak when you're ready.
Good evening.
Hi there.
Hi. Okay, great. Just listening to all the comments and all the discussions. I'm a longtime resident here. And what our last speaker was saying, I've said this before, and I will repeat it again. We have a water shortage. We have a water crisis, and the thought of putting even more units in really, really frightens me. We have no idea what nature is going to do for us. So please keep that in mind when you are planning this. And I know people need places to live, but if you're living somewhere and you don't have water, I don't think you're going to be living there. I think you're going to be living somewhere else anyway. So please do remember the water crisis that we are in, and that we have no idea when it's going to improve. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. Okay. At this time, I don't see any other hands. Yeah, it looks like that's it. We have one of the applicants would like to speak. So if there are no more attendees in the audience wishing to speak, Chair Kuznick, if you'd like, we can go ahead and close out public comment.
Thank you. Yes, I will close, pardon me, close the public comment on this topic. And it seems that we have a rebuttal comment. So Ms. Cunningham, or more information.
I think perhaps maybe Denise just dropped out of the room.
Okay.
I moved her back in, so she should be with us in just a minute here.
Okay. Trying to really keep up on my hand raising here.
I'm back. Thank you.
Okay.
I was dropped previously and couldn't get back in. Thank you again for your time this evening, and just a couple of comments. I think some of the questions on density were raised by some of the commissioners as well. And although the density range is changing as one of our requests for the specific plan amendment, the density on this site is not being reduced from what was analyzed in the previous EIR. So we're maximizing the density on the site while also implementing some of the goals and policies of the specific plan by providing a diversity of housing. So not just stack flats or condos, but townhomes and small lot single family homes. So I just wanted to point that out as well. And as far as the park, we are relocating the park to the corner of Executive and Camino Ramon. And that was in response to several meetings and comments and conversations with staff. But again, consistent with some of the policies of the specific plan, we've included paseos and walkability and linear park and walkways, as well as some of the pocket parks. So it's not just limited to the 2-acre park on site as far as open space. And again, we'll go into more detail on that on the project level meeting on the 19th. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, I think at this point I'd like to walk you
just through the chair real quick. Sorry, I see Jerry has his hand raised. I didn't know if you
Oh,
wanted
I'm
to.
sorry. Did not see it. Go ahead, Mr. Engen.
Thank you. No problem. I just wanted to add one comment on to what Denise had said earlier, and that is that as it relates to the park, that went before the joint the joint city council and parks commission meeting where they discussed this at length, and then went for the final approval to the parks commission, which was unanimously voted in favor of this location for the park with some guidance on what they wanted it to be programmed by. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't lost on everybody. That was voted on by the Parks Commission at a 5-0 vote.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. All right. So seeing no other hands raised at this time, what I'd like to do is, because this is quite lengthy, and I think it's important that we take this opportunity to walk through what it is that we're asking being asked to consider. So I'm taking my cue from former Chair Wallace, and we're going to go through this starting on packet page 27 and walk our way through the proposed amendments and just see as we go item by item if people have comments or concerns.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Are we ready to go through the resolution now? We really didn't have an opportunity to talk other than to ask clarification questions at the outset.
So if I did not make myself clear, let me try this again, because what I thought I was trying to initiate was the discussion of not so much the resolution, but going through the matrix of the items, because that's where I jotted all my notes for a very self-serving way.
Okay, that's fine.
Is that agreeable as we go through it? Because I do want to be thorough. I feel like this is really quite lengthy and deserves us to take the time to consider each of the amendments. Yeah, Commissioner Alpert.
I do have a question, I think, for Ms. Yee. We heard two comments about changes that were contemplated on this very, I think, targeted specific plan amendment. Does that set a precedent for any other future changes outside of Block G, whether it's density or parks or anything else by our action if we were to approve this specific plan amendment? Could you comment on what, if anything, it means for Block D or E or the other part of Block G?
So as you read through the 23 and the additional 24th amendment, you'll find that the changes are primarily specific to Block G. I will say the one caveat to that is going to be the inclusionary policy. That inclusionary policy will apply to the entire plan. And so that does have a potential change to future projects that are proposed on other blocks. But the majority of the changes are specifically related to Block G.
Okay.
And don't limit any future, projects from being able to be designed in accordance with the plan as you know it today.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are we all, everybody ready to go? All right, so I'm starting on packet page 27. We have briefly mentioned the amendment number 1. Any additional questions or discussion on that first one? Okay.
I do.
Okay.
All right.
Go. Thank you.
All right. As we pointed out earlier, the particular section that we're looking at relates to the history of the drafting of the plan. The language in it applies to the entirety of the North Camino Road specific plan. So it is not accurate to say this particular change is specific to Block G. The proposal is to take out language that talks about mixed use land concepts for the entirety of the North Camino Ramon plan. When the plan was drafted in 2012, it was considered to be a mixed use development because it was perceived at that time that that was a way to put retail and residential together. And as people who were there at the time know, that part of the reason that was done was to provide a base for city center, which we all wanted to be successful. It was also considered that city center would never supply all the needs of potential residents for the North Camino Ramon specific area. When we drafted the plan, we had logged 1,500 units in this area. To date, only 116 have been built. City Walk, which is 4,500 units, is outside the North Camino Road specific plan. The city council, at one point at least, reduced the number of units down to 1,144. So even if you use that number, we still have on the books plans for over 1,000 units in North Camino Ramon specific plan, which would include the BR6 400 units. Now, the justification for taking out the highlighted language is that the plan was developed prior to the approval of City Walk and the what's perceived to be the demise of the retail market. It is true, obviously, that this plan was developed before City Walk was approved, because City Walk wasn't approved until recently. The plan itself was done in 2012. The idea of the retail project was that we would have retail next to residential, not to compete with city center, but to be complementary to it. Now, we've had two economic strategic plans that have come in front of us in the last couple of years. One was in 2018, the retail strategy, which I won't bore you with, but basically it is to concentrate retail either in city center or along the Crow Canyon corridor east of 680. We also had the economic plan in April of 2019. Now, both of those plans were developed before City Walk was even proposed. So those plans did not take into account 4,500 units, which is about 13,500 people being adjacent to BR26 and also North Camino Ramon, nor did it take into account BR6, which is going from 0 residential units to 400, which in simple math is about 1,200 people. So the economic plan that is the basis for this deletion really doesn't take into account somewhere around 15,000 people living somewhere between Bollinger Canyon and Crow Canyon Road, between El Costa and the freeway. And it is facetious to think that those 15,000 people's day-to-day living needs are going to be met by City Center, which is a lifestyle center. There's no pharmacies, there's no grocery stores, there's no hardware stores, there's no cleaners. So it doesn't meet the needs of those 15,000 people. The other thing that we need to take into account, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record, is that we now have, or we will have by the end of next week, a mandate from the state to plan for 5,000 units, of which 3,000 have to be affordable housing. And I've already run the numbers by you on more occasions than I want to remember. But we're talking about adding 15,000 plus units to San Ramon, and the city walk units are only a small portion of those, particularly in the next housing cycle. There is going to be an increase in units that's going to be proposed for the North Camino Ramon specific plan. And in my view, it is not realistic to think that all those people are either going to go to city center or the adjacent areas that are coming up as flex space next to BR 2600 or Crow Canyon Road. So I would propose to leave that language in there, because at this point, I don't think there's enough evidence in the record for us to redo what amounts to redoing the entire North Camino Ramon specific plan by jettisoning the mixed use concepts. It does not take anything away from BR6 to leave it in. It is not essential to approving the BR6 project if we decide to do that. And I would leave it in.
Other commissioners' comments on that particular item? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wallace. Okay, moving on to next page, amendment number 2, revise policy 3.5 requiring compliance with the city inclusionary ordinance. Comments on this particular one from anyone? So are we in general consensus that this is a good amendment, that we like this? Seeing no disagreements.
Well,
go ahead.
Okay, it's one thing to go along with it, the other to like it.
Okay, fair enough.
I look at this like I did the Northwest specific plan that we did. We had 25% affordable housing in that area. It got thrown out at the end. When we did North Camino Ramon specific plan, we did 25% affordable housing. So obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, in my opinion, a 25% affordable housing requirement would go a lot longer to meeting what is going to be difficult at best affordable housing requirements. But I think in light of the fact that the city has passed an inclusionary ordinance, that I was at the HAC meetings when they discussed it, and it is not unreasonable plan, that I don't have a problem with making that in this specific plan area, just like it is in the rest of the city.
Okay. I thank you. Well put, much better than I expressed the question. I would agree in the sense that I think it's important for this particular section to be consistent with the city ordinance on inclusionary housing. All right. Seeing next page. Item 3, revise the text to clarify the mixed use is not required in multifamily residence. I know I have an item targeted on this page, but I would like to see if others do for this particular amendment. All right, so my concern is the line where it says small commercial uses may be integrated into ground floors to provide nearby services. So the question is, if this amendment is written with the word may instead of will, does that apply to all of North Camino Ramon's specific plan or only this one area? Because the way I read it, it would apply to the whole plan, and that defeats our purpose of making this a mixed use. Commissioner Wallace.
Yeah, I spent some time going over this one as well as the first one. Actually, I spent a lot of time going over a lot of this, and it occurred to me about 2 o'clock this afternoon that I probably spent too much time. I wasn't using my time efficiently. I think the answer to your question is no for this reason. There are various land uses in the North Camino Ramon specific plan, only one of which is multifamily mixed use. It is, and now staff can correct me if I am taking an interpretation different from theirs, but as I read what is proposed and where it is proposed, that it only applies to 2 areas. Well, if we pass this amendment, the first is obviously it applies to the mixed density residential. I'm going to call it MDR because mixed density residential, too many words for me. The MDR reason. The second is, I believe it only applies to the multi-family mixed use designated areas. Now, those are the areas on the east side of Camino Ramon, which are basically for housing between 20 and 50 units. It would not apply to the commons area, which is mixed use, in my opinion, nor would it apply to the destination retail area that currently exists. It would only apply to BR6 and to the residential area on the east side of Camino Ramon. And that, so in that case, and on the latter, if you go to the table on table 4.3, it is permitted in the multifamily mixed use to have residential space on the first floor of the building. And as you know, the generally commercial uses, particularly retail, are on the first floor anyway. So I think that this is one of those amendments, when you piece it together, really only applies to BR6 because they're changing it from commercial mixed use to residential. It was always the right in multifamily residential to have residential on the first floor and not to require commercial uses in the building.
Okay.
The ability, but it wasn't required. Now, staff, if I read it wrong, speak up now, save me.
No, that's accurate.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. I have a question when we get to number 5 about revising the streets E and F. Because as I looked at the specific plan, it does not, at least I cannot read where if you are eliminating E and F altogether or only in the portion that is in this block.
Are we waiting on 5 or did we already talk about 4? Did you want to?
Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me. Good catch. I didn't have any questions, so I just moved on. Item number 4. Are any questions on amendment number 4? Which is remove the description of Bishop Branch office on page 3-11.
Chair
Madam
Kuznick?
Chair,
Yes,
I
When
wanted
you-
to just,
Commissioner Marks, go ahead.
when you turn your head, you cut out and I can't hear what you're saying.
I'm very sorry. Thank you for letting me know. I'll try to do better. Well, I have a strange office set up here. Amendment number 4. The question is, are there comments on amendment number 4 on page 29? All right. Seeing no one give me the look. Now, going to amendment number 5, if we could please. My question was, first of all, I have a question, but do others have a question? All right, then I will, go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Alpert.
On figure, so we don't call out figure 6.2 as needing to be revised of the plan. That's the plan document 613. And 6.2 is the diagram that references the specific streets E and F. So I would suggest that we add that. No, my question is, should we add that figure to the list of diagrams and updates that should be revised?
We will ask the staff to look at that.
Right. Okay.
My question is, as they are the discussion of streets E and F, it's only a portion of E and F that are not going to be included in this property, this block. So are we eliminating, is the language saying that we're eliminating E and F left to right, the whole thing, or just the portion in this block, in this G4 block?
Sure, I can answer that question. So street E and F, when you look at figure 6.2, and just for everybody's reference, that's on page 6-13 of the specific plan. You are correct. It currently diagrams street E going from east to west, from Bishop Drive to Camino Ramon. Going through that Commons circular roadway before it connects onto Bishop Ranch 6. The intention is just to eliminate Street E as it relates to the Bishop Ranch 6 property. As you might recall, that overlay map that we had shown the Commons roadway and that circular connection still exists west of Bishop Ranch 6. And so it wouldn't intend to eliminate what would be Street E on the adjacent property.
Does that need to be specified in this amendment item?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea to acknowledge Commissioner Alpert's comments related to figure 6.2, and then also just that the change to street E and F only pertain to what's happening on sub area block G, where Bishop Ranch 6 is.
Thank you. All right, next page.
Before we go,
Right.
I
Mr.
did have a
Wallace.
comment. I did have a comment, and I may be swimming upstream, as Ms. Yee indicated that the final drawings are done after the city council votes on the amendments. I'm not comfortable myself on voting for amendments without seeing a final version of the drawings and the diagrams, and this discussion about street F sort of, proves, I think, my point is that I personally think that these things ought to be in front of us in black and white before we vote on it. I'm real uncomfortable about allowing drawings and diagrams to go forward just the basis of language, because as you see from the discussion that the chair had with Ms. Yee, they're not always completely what we think they are. So I raise that, and here's my question, is really to staff. Hypothetically speaking, would it be possible to put the drawings and the diagrams that we were talking about to effectuate the changes to the North Camino Ramon specific plan in order to facilitate the development of BR6 by our next meeting, whenever that is? See, I brought this up at our last meeting, that the discussion of the North Camino Ramon specific plan is not governed by SB 330. There are no clocks running for us to make a decision. So if it is possible to have the final set of drawings and diagrams and tables done for our next meeting, I, for one, would feel more comfortable in having a vote at that meeting. But again, I may be swimming upstream, and the rest of the commissioners may be okay with going ahead and vote and letting the council vote without having seen it either. But I just feel uncomfortable about doing that.
Thank you, Commissioner Wallace. I think your point is well taken, and I suspect others might agree. Commissioner Albert, I thought I briefly saw a hand.
No, I was just going to weigh in that I'm feeling the same way, specifically around the streets, because I found it really difficult to follow the changes in the streets without referring back to the drawing. And I think that would be extremely helpful, you know.
And I would concur. I actually sat with the laptop and the specific plan on my screen and the matrix on my table and did them simultaneously for the same through the same process of analysis. All right. We move on to item 6. Okay, revising figure 3.5 to show the location of the residential park and the linear open space. Now I'm going to stop here and say I'm going to need a definition of this term linear open space, because that one was new to me in these changes. Ms. Yee or Mr. Barr?
It's referring to the horizontal green space. It's not a centralized park. It's more of a parkway or a linear open space as it is described in the plan.
But it is along Camino Ramon, as this is indicating?
I'm sorry, hold on a second. Let me catch up to you here.
I think it refers to the comments.
That's just a phrase that the
Yeah,
applicant has chose to refer to Camino Ramon. They refer to it as the linear open space, but that's not actually in the specific plan document itself. It's just how they refer to Camino Ramon.
So we would call it a sidewalk. Is that more generic?
I mean, it's been called parkway as well. It just, again, it's a different terminology.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're all using terms that we have a shared understanding of the definition. And the residential park then would refer to the planned park on the corner of Camino Ramon, and executive.
Correct.
Thank you. Any comments on item 6, amendment item number 6? Okay. Seeing no others, moving on to amendment number 7. Changing the designation to MDR from BRMU. Any adjustments, corrections on that amendment? Seeing no one looking puzzled, I will go ahead. Commissioner Alford, take your time. You look like you weren't ready. Okay, very good. Just reading too much into your expressions. Here we go. Item number 8, removing the description of BRMU and adding the description of the mixed density MDR, including the staff's changes in the far right-hand column. Commissioner Wallace.
No, I agree with the changes that staff proposed. I think the description is apt, so I would support that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, amendment 9. Removing the reference to BRMU and converting to MDR with residential upper floors and live work space. Go ahead, Commissioner Wallace.
Yeah, I had a comment. This has to do with 9. Since we are converting what is commercial space to purely residential, I would propose that we treat the live work units that may be developed in the MDR in the same way that they are treated in the multi-family mixed use, which is also residential. And that is live work is permitted with a use permit. You keep it consistent.
Okay. Any other feedback on item 9, amendment number 9? Okay, moving on to amendment item number 10. Okay, revising the illustration of the public space framework, page 5-3. And again, my only item on when I circled this was the definition of the linear park, but we've resolved that issue. Going forward, however, it might be something that we might need to somehow reference the definition of that, you know, somewhere in the design standards, for example. Okay, questions? We ready to go on? Turning my page. There we go. Item number 11, revising table 6.1. I think that seems straightforward to me. Commissioner Wallace?
Okay, so there's 2 areas in here. There's floor area ratio and residential density. Now, the proposed change was to put in under the floor area ratio, the language that maximum floor area ratio does not apply to the MDR district, which I think is reasonable since it's all residential. However, I think it also ought to apply to the multifamily residential districts as well to keep it consistent.
Thoughts, commissioners? Mm. I'm always for clarity and consistency, so we'll ask the staff to look at that. Okay, amendment item number 12. Revise the description of block G to include mixed density residential and the MDR. Commissioner Wallace.
Okay, so the highlighted portion of number 12 has to do with adding the MDR into the description of mixed density residential. I guess that's okay. I guess what I'm a little bit confused about is why the term high density multifamily appears in there, but I guess that it doesn't hurt when he was adding in mixed density residential. Seems unnecessary, but it's not going to cause any harm.
Okay. Others? Okay. Item 13. I think we revised the illustration of conceptual development of block G consistent with the proposed project. Okay, show the location. Okay. I did have a question as to what page or what's the reference on this in the specific plan, but
I believe that's page 6-11, but
six dash, I'm sorry, say it again.
6-11.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Seeing no comments for item 13, moving on to item 14, please. Okay. Revising the text 6-12 to be consistent. We are changing a number of the streets, minimum street wall height, location of our public park, and some street naming items. All right. So questions related to this text? So I didn't see a hand go up, so I'm going to throw mine in. My question is the applicable street sections. Are we to assume then that this is proposing a renaming of a variety of streets? And is this just for location purposes, or will this be something? Are we going to now refer to it Norris Canyon Road East, Norris Canyon Road West? Or is that just for clarity, that designation?
It's primarily for clarity because Bishop Ranch 6 is only on the east side of Norris Canyon.
Okay.
Those changes are now applying to the east. Similar to Street E, there's a reference to east versus west. The east section is what's being eliminated,
Mhm.
but
Okay.
the west is going to remain.
All right, thank you. Okay. Any other comments on that number 14? All right, amendment item number 15. The redesignate street sections in the plan, Norris Canyon West. Okay, and revise that section key on page 6-13. Okay. Seeing no hands. Item 16. Sorry. The throat is going. All right, here we go. I have to excuse myself. Can I? Vice Chair Alpert, do you want to pick up here for me? Because this could
Sure.
go on for a while.
Okay, sure. So I think we left off and we're at, I believe it's item 17, Community Ramon South. Were there any comments, questions? Okay, as proposed. Okay. Okay. Turning the page. Item 18 was to remove street sections 616 and 617, which are the infamous streets E and F that we've talked about previously. Okay. And then before we move to the next item, 19, I wanted to just ask a question on, is the street referenced in the diagrams, the commons, is that what we've been seeing in the development application as street A? Or is it kind of, no, that's where I'm kind of myself. Lauren, I think, was starting to answer, yeah.
No, the Commons is farther to the west and extends all the way through Crow Canyon. Commons, Street A and the project is internal to the Bishop Ranch 6 site.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, and just to clarify on figure 6.2, you'll see the diagram where it shows where the commons is labeled. In that north-south direction, it intersects all of the street A through F in the middle.
Okay, but it's farther to the west than what this BR6 project entails. This is what I think I understood.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Okay. Okay, I'm looking at Commissioner or Chair. Continue. Okay. Item 19.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Commissioner Edwards has her
Oh,
hand up.
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
That's okay.
Edwards. Yeah.
Thank you. I just had a comment or question on item 19, number 18. If I understood Ms. Yee earlier, we were not going to be removing street F from the plan, and we were only going to be removing street E, that portion of street E that's within BR6. If I understood that correctly, then I don't know that we want to get rid of those street sections at diagrams 6-16 and 6-17.
I think you would want to remove them within the project area, and perhaps relocate them farther to the west, if that's the case. But the profile of the sections are not the same within the project area.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to item 19, revising text on page 6-32, discussing private streets and in residential areas only.
Yeah, this was an item that I read and was quite surprised that there could be, on a minor private street that we don't have to have sidewalks. This did cause me some concern.
Well, I guess the question is, are the streets that are programmed for BR6 going to have sidewalks or not? Simple, straight question.
Yeah, so I can probably answer that. And they're in your project plan sheets. I know they were attached with your July 6th staff report, and they're not attached to this, but there are sidewalks on all of the private roadways within Bishop Ranch 6, with the exception of there's a parking area on the south end, southwest end of the development, where on one side of the street there's a sidewalk, but on the other side is just a parking lane, and there is no sidewalk on that side of the parking lane. So that's the only place on the vesting tentative map that I can see without a sidewalk.
Well, if that's the case, then what's the point of this amendment?
Well, it technically applies to all private streets. And so that one area of that small section of the project may not encompass each and every one of those components that are required in that text. So there is a minor area in BR6 that does not have sorry, I just lost that page.
It's 6.32, and what you're saying is that it really should read, with the exception of a minor exception to a minor public, minor private street. If the idea is to not have a sidewalk in an area for some parking, why not just say with the exception of an area designated for parking?
Well, in this case, you're talking about a policy direction as opposed to a specific site level design question. You could have an alternative configuration at some case where you would have alley loaded situations that wouldn't have sidewalks, but would have private streets. Again, it's about flexibility in terms of how you treat private streets. In the case of the project that's being requested, they're going to have sidewalks based on what Cindy had outlined. But that's not to say, as you mentioned in the past, you're changing the plan as opposed to entitling the project.
Okay, well, okay, now I'm confused, because the development standards on page 6-32 say, quote, sidewalks, street trees, and planting strips are required along all streets in the specific plan area. And then apparently the revision that's proposed in the paragraph 19 is to that particular sentence to read, sidewalks, street trees, and planting strips are required along all streets in the specific plan area, which repeats what's on page 632. And then it has an exception, quote, with the exception of minor private streets in the MDR district, period, close quote. But from what I understand, the minor private streets in the MDR district are going to have sidewalks with the exception of a small area for parking.
Again, as currently proposed by the applicant.
Well, we could make that clear by putting it in the specific plan, then we wouldn't have a dispute later on. But as it is now, as it reads now, they don't have to put sidewalks in on any of the minor public streets. And I agree with the chair, that's not a really good idea. Now, maybe you can come up with some language that would accommodate what they're proposing to do, which is have a parking area, but still require them to have sidewalks on the minor public streets. But you're giving them a blanket exception for all the streets, all the minor public streets in BR6.
Well, we could look at the language tying it to the parking areas, which would include alley loaded situations as well.
Right. You put the language for the exception, not for the general rule that private streets have to have sidewalks.
So Commissioner Wallace, just to make sure we're all on the same page, the default should be sidewalks on all minor streets. The exception is whatever is the exception, where the expectation is we have sidewalks on all minor streets in the specific plan area. And then if there's an exception, we need to come up with language which would allow for limited exceptions, I think is what I'm hearing you say, like in the case in this project where part of the sidewalk has been replaced by parking.
Exactly. What we're trying to define is the exception to the general rule that minor private streets in the MDR district have to have sidewalks.
Perhaps that may read with exceptions to where a parking area or alleyway may limit such improvements.
Yeah, that's what I said. If there's a parking area, I can see that as an exception to the sidewalk.
So,
but you're defining what the exception is.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Commissioner Mark.
I have a feeling that we will be bringing these policy changes back at a future meeting. Perhaps the staff can come back with the proposed final language on this at that time.
I believe we're probably headed in that direction. Yes. We do only have a few more, and then I hope that we can agree to a break. So, but I'll need to limit my talking.
Okay.
Amendment number 20. And this one has a staff revision where we're changing the density from 20 to 14. And then the definition of the MDR being more specific in the changes put forth by the staff. Commissioner Wallace, you still have your hand up. I just want to make sure I'm not missing.
No, I actually had a question, and that is on packet page 40, the third bullet point down, second to last sentence, the penultimate sentence says, details, materials, and scale of commercial element. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean because MDR is residential only. Unless you're allowing commercial in MDR.
Could you give me the location of what you're
Sure.
citing? Sorry.
Yeah, it's the top section on packet page 40, third bullet point,
Okay.
next to last sentence. Starts out details, comma, materials. I was just wondering what commercial element was the idea, because if you look at above, it says where appropriate, comma, integrated commercial space services and residential amenities, blah, 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 which was taken out. So I'm not sure what the commercial element is supposed to refer to. Maybe someone can help me.
Let me just take a look at that and I'll be right. I'm having a difficult time locating the original language.
Need about 3 computer screens.
Yeah, it would appear that you wouldn't need that particular bullet, given that there would be no commercial elements in the mixed density residential.
Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you. I have just a comment in terms of the density reduction here. It looks like the intent is to reduce the density from 14 to 40 units per acre. Excuse me. It was 20 to 40 units per acre, and it looks like we're reducing it to 14 to 30 units per acre. I think I'd prefer to see it stay 14 to 40 so that we have a higher density in the event that this project is not approved or this project does not proceed.
So if I could just clarify that in column 3, I think staff starts out with for ease of readability, we would create a whole new separate section just for mixed density residential, rather than trying to combine multifamily density and mixed density residential into one super description. We're keeping the mixed multifamily medium density as it's currently written, and then we're adding to that page 7-15 an additional new section that would specifically just be for mixed density residential.
But to Commissioner Edwards' point, it could just as easily remain. I mean, I think the amendment lowers the number to 14. What she's suggesting is that it should, perhaps we retain the upper number of 40.
Yeah, that's how I read Commissioner Edwards' comments, is that she's okay with dropping the minimum down to 14 to accommodate the project. But in the event the project isn't approved, she wants to have the flexibility to have a project in there that has higher density than the one that's proposed.
I'm not sure if you need a staff comment on that, but
no, I think you've heard okay. 3 of us on that one.
Well, let me ask the question. In all fairness, we've been talking about changing the MDR to 14 to 30 units. What is the downside in raising the upper limit to 40?
Or keeping it 40?
Well, yes, keeping it.
Okay.
Well, actually, we're not keeping it at 40 because we're creating a whole new land use. Right. So the question is, what's the downside in establishing the upper limit for the MDR at 40 instead of 30? I'm sure there's someone who has an answer to that question.
I'm not sure that there actually is a downside other than it changes the potential profile of units throughout the plan area, but there's still a cap on total number of units allowed. So again, not all projects will develop at all density levels. So it's just a matter of managing the unit count for the project as a whole.
I think Lauren's right. It's really, in my view, just about scale, scale and scale relationships.
I guess Commissioner Marks, are you in favor of raising the top end to 40?
Well, I would raise the top end to 40 because the more, if somebody takes advantage of it, the more units we can place in this area, the less pressure there is outside of the Bishop Ranch area to do things.
Yeah.
And this is a neighborhood, or it will be a neighborhood that we're not going to hear from existing neighborhoods about scale issues.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything else? Packet page 41 is still that last item. Excuse me.
We're on 41.
Well, we're turning to packet page, where am I? 42. I just turned the page.
Okay, I did have
Go
something
ahead.
on. I did have something on packet page 41.
Okay.
In the third column, the very last bullet statement regarding roofs, I would like to insert some language. Right now it says roofs may be either flat or sloped with variations in height, etc. I would like to change this to read roofs may be either flat or sloped, comma, constructed with dimensional roofing materials with variations in height and silhouette against the sky. In short, adding the words constructed with dimensional roofing materials. That's very consistent with our objective guidelines that we established in the San Ramon Village, former Crow Canyon specific plan, and that I think we are using in other projects as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Marks. All right, we turn our page. Amendment number 21A. Any comments or questions in this section?
Well, I want to note that the staff comment on the far right-hand column says that with the proposed change to paragraph 20, which inserts a new MDR design guidelines section, that it is staff's opinion that there's no need to adopt 21A. So I guess that the question to the commissioners would be, do you agree with staff that if we adopt 20, we don't need 21A? I would agree with staff.
Commissioner Alpert?
I think I had a question just for clarification. We have in the document for the new definition guidelines, is there any place in the document that actually have the objective design standards, even if they exactly match what's being proposed with BR6? Just one of the questions that's been coming up is, if this project goes away and somebody else comes in, do we have sufficient objective design standards for this type of property that we would be satisfied with somebody coming in and building it? Not to change what BR6 in the current project is doing, but in the event that a new person comes in with a completely different design, that's my question about objective design standards.
Yeah, I guess that what I'm getting at, what I'm hearing is, are these objective design standards like we baked into the San Ramon Village specific plan will withstand Court of Appeals scrutiny that took place in the San Mateo case?
Thank you for putting the right words in my mouth.
Well, I'm going to punt that back to staff.
So I guess at least staff's response to that would be, when you read through the design guidelines, there are very specific objective standards. For example, windows recessed a minimum of 2 inches from the outside face of the wall. There's some very specific objective standards that are in place in the design guidelines. Whether or not they may be to the level that you believe that they need to be, that would be up to the commission's debate. But there are certainly design standards in here that are objective, that can be applied to a project if BR6 did not come, the city village project did not come to fruition, that could still be designed against these guidelines.
But let me ask a question to sort of follow up on that. My understanding is that the issue of design standards, objective standards, was under one of the state legislation. Maybe it's SB 30. There's so many of them, it's hard to keep track. But basically, they froze into place design standards that existed in 2018. Am I correct that one of the bills that Governor Newsom signed the other day would basically extend the sunset date for that particular provision until 2030?
You're correct. SB 8 was adopted or was signed and does extend SB 330. And so the design guidelines that currently are in place, if we were to apply SB 330 to a future project on this property, the design guidelines that existed in 2018, which would be the current text, that's what would be used as the design guidelines.
Okay, that's what I thought. Just want to make clear. So we're stuck for another 9 years.
Okay.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question of Cindy?
Yes, of course.
Cindy, one of the objective design guidelines I think that we included in the San Ramon Village Plan was above either the first or second floor, floors needed to be set back 10 feet or roughly that. I don't see that in this set of guidelines unless I'm missing it.
I'd probably need to go get the San Ramon Village specific plan guidelines in order to be able to pinpoint that particular standard.
Perhaps the next time we review this overall set of policy amendments, you could take a look at that and see whether that's worth including.
Could you just repeat that particular standard?
Sure. We had and I can't remember if it's above the second floor or the third floor, but that there's a 10-foot setback in wall plane, so that again the building is not overwhelming the public street and steps back the higher it gets. I think Eric was shaking his head. He remembers that as well.
I think that actually came up at the TLC townhomes on Deerwood, because they made a point of saying that they did step back at the level you're talking
about. Okay, I can certainly look that up. Would you want to apply that?
I would.
To this project? Okay.
I would.
I'm sorry, not to this project, but to the MDR
right.
zone. Yeah.
Right.
All right, packet page 43, amendment item 21B, the bicycle circulation amendment, eliminating the class 1. Well, it really deals with if there's no street E, there's no designation for bicycle use on street E. Or F. Which I don't think is if we're eliminating the streets, then sort of eliminates the bicycle requirements. Okay, seeing no hands, next page. Item 23, any other amendments necessary for internal consistency? And this was the addition at the third column of the language about concerning the walking district, which we have described and commented on already. Unless, yes, Commissioner Marks.
Actually, in item 24,
Okay.
Where it says policy DIS-1.4, in the third line, after the third word, which is goals, I would like to add the word, or add a comma, and then the word policies.
Okay. And then the rest of the sentence
is fine.
Okay, excellent. Okay. All right. Very good. I sing. I know we're we look like we're writing industriously. I would like to propose, it is 8:57 and wondered if the commission would be willing to take a short break at this time before we come back and have at least more discussion on question about the specific plan amendments. I see one person nodding, yay.
I wonder if we can finish this up and then take that break before the concept reviews for the other projects.
All right. Okay, Ms. Cunningham, you have raised your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to respond to the comment about the 10-foot step back that Commissioner Marks had raised, and that just simply doesn't work with any of our designs presently. It would be an entirely different project. So I would like to, the commission, if they could reconsider that.
Thank you. So at this time, I think I am ready to hear where you stand on this specific idea, the specific plan amendments. I know I've drafted my thoughts on this topic, but would like to hear from our commissioners where they are on this particular one, and so that we can see if we agree on what a next step might be. So, Commissioner Marks.
I was not aiming at the BR6 404 unit project, and if this is a showstopper for them, I would be willing to say, don't include what I was talking about relative to the 10-foot setback.
Well, I had a question, and that I brought up earlier. Let's assume, for hypothetically speaking, we put a 10-foot setback into the specific plan. Is the there's an application pending. So are the design guidelines applicable to the present application, the ones that were in effect in 2018, regardless of what we do today?
And perhaps maybe, I don't know if the city attorney might want to weigh in on this, but this application that has been filed for City Village does not include a preliminary application to be processed under SB 330. So the design guidelines that currently exist, the applicant is designed based on the 2012, but they're also going to be designing based on whatever amendments you make to that specific plan. I don't think that they have any intent to redesign the project to only match the 2018. They would need the changes that are being incorporated as part of the specific plan in order to facilitate the city village design. So at least in this particular case, SB 330 doesn't apply as far as changing the design standards, because the applicant are the ones proposing those design guideline changes. But maybe the city attorney might have a different opinion there.
I haven't fully been able to read the newest SB 8. I thought there's something that expanded, so it's not just preliminary applications, but also completed applications. I think they had some language like that. But aside from that, it's the 2018 date is used for zoning and so like down zoning, reducing intensity, those type of actions have to be had to have been done by January 1st, 2018. Now, design standards that were imposing design standards that are not objective had to have been done by January 1st, 2020. So if you were imposing your own design standards, maybe not the ones that the applicant is willing to do, but your own that are subjective, you're not going to be able to impose those.
Then I should probably also note, I believe SB 8 is not in effect until January 2022. I believe it doesn't go into effect immediately. So if that's just another consideration, even if the rules were to change, they don't change until at least January 1st.
Well, I had a question, and that is, at the time the application, whichever you want to phrase it out, was submitted, the area in question wasn't zoned for residential. So I'm not sure that SB 330 applies when you have to change the zoning from commercial to residential. Anyway.
Well, just keep in mind, BRMU is a mixed zoning that allows for residential and commercial. There is language in there that assumes that a mixed use project would have a combination of the two uses, but the general plan also mirrors that same mixed use expectation. The underlying general plan destination also is allows for mixed use. So even though the site itself isn't currently it's not just only a commercial switching to a residential, it does still recognize that there was a residential component to the BRMU. It's just that it's eliminating the requirement to have commercial on site to be considered mixed use.
Okay, yeah, I know Mr. Marks was shaking his head too.
Go ahead, Commissioner Marks.
I think this is getting more complicated than at least I intended. I had been thinking when I made the point about the 10-foot setback, other buildings other than this application before us, and that was an error on my part. If that 10-foot setback situation creates any kind of problem for the houses that are proposed, I would not want it to be adopted. My personal preference is I like the mix of housing that is being proposed, and I don't want to send anybody back to the drawing boards at this time. So maybe we could just forget I said that and move on.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. So we have Commissioner Edwards would like us to sort of get to a finishing point on this particular agenda item. And so this is now the opportunity for each of us to weigh in and kind of see where we are on the issue of the specific plan amendments. Commissioner Wallace, you have your hand up.
Okay, so here I have a question for staff. is it possible or feasible to continue the hearing on the specific plan amendment either to the first meeting in October or the October 19 meeting, with the idea that the discussion we've had today will engender further revisions to the specific plan that everybody can read and assimilate prior to the next meeting? And maybe, just maybe, we can actually have updated drawings and diagrams similarly to have in front of us when we meet the next time.
Just a response to that, I mean, there are a couple of possibilities related to timing of this. I don't think it's practical to have design level drawings done for these changes. And again, it's been our practice to make the final edits and changes after the direction is approved. We could do a markup of plans to at least indicate better in terms of what is being changed, but it wouldn't be the final production level type drawing. The other possibility that we could consider if the commission is agreeable to it is the changes that you have mentioned are pretty specific, and we have a very good record of it, not to mention the fact that this is videoed. So we can produce an errata sheet based on the comments they had or provided as an attachment to the resolution that could be verified by the chair at the time of signing of the resolution and passed along to the city council for their consideration. As an alternative to that, I think October 5th would be the preference to come back with errata changes based on this. But again, it's just a question of the level of production that you're looking for. Again, these are graphics that are not easily manipulated, and so we're going to have to take some effort to refine them.
Okay, so what I'm getting from all that is the staff's druthers would be follow the normal practice. We prepare the drawings once city council has made a final decision, but that you can come back to us on the 5th with the revisions to the text that we've been discussing for the last 2 hours. And at that time, we presumably would be prepared to vote on a resolution to send upstairs.
Well, again, whether you basically allow us to proceed with an errata or whether you want to come back with the errata, including additional revisions on the 5th, that's a question for the commission to make. Again, staff feels like we have a very good understanding of what the changes are that you've outlined by going through it in the detail you did. It's pretty clear what needs to change, and we feel like we could capture that in an exhibit that would be forwarded on to the council based on the recommendations of planning commission, and then that could move on at that point. But again, there's a couple paths that we can choose. It's really the commission's choice as to how they want to proceed. However, if you're wanting to have another hearing on this, October 5th would be the preferred date.
Right. So Commissioner Marks, I see your hand up. I don't know if it's still up or.
Actually, it's still up from something else. But,
Okay.
but I will just say, it seemed to me that some of the commissioners were saying that they're not comfortable voting on these changes without seeing the graphic changes for the streets. And so that to me begs the notion that we need to take a look at it one more time before a vote is taken. The applicant has a pretty good idea of where we're going, or at least where most of the commissioners are going. And as long as it happens before the 19th, that would be fine, or it could even happen the night of the 19th.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wallace?
I guess my hand was still up because I'm
Okay, all right.
take it down.
Okay.
Through the chair, just to clarify, staff's preference would not be to have these items held or heard on the 19th when you're considering the entitlement side of things. We would prefer that it remains a separate track so that we can focus the attention on the issue at hand and not get confused with design level questions as opposed to policy direction.
Okay, I think that I agree with Mr. Barr on that one. So what I do is I make a motion to continue the public hearing on the specific plan amendments to October 5. That's motion number one, and we can either join it with a second motion, or I can make a second motion if the parliamentarian wants to tell me it needs to be a second motion to continue the hearing on the application itself to October 19th.
So do we have an official ruling whether we need separate motions or we can put those together? Staff? Well, neither one have been seconded, so we're kind of
I'll
in a-
defer to the city attorney, but I think that the direction's clear from a two-phase motion.
Okay. So the motion is to continue this to the October 5th. And what was the other part, Commissioner Wallace?
We can continue the hearing on the application itself to October 19th.
Okay. All right. That is the motion before you.
I will second it, but I do think for discussion purposes, Mr. Barr asked for direction on what staff should come back with on October the 5th. And so I think we at least should wrap that piece up.
No,
so it's clear, or unless you're completely clear and have a good direction.
I mean, I'll defer to Cindy if she has questions, but I think the potential revisions are pretty clear from the comments received. Whether the entire commission agrees with all the changes is yet to be determined, but I think we have pretty good direction on how to mark up the graphics and additional red line changes. Cindy, do you have any additional needs in terms of direction?
I don't know if it would help if I summarize the requested changes. I had taken some notes. So if I could perhaps just confirm the edits that you were requesting to return back on the 5th. I don't know if that would help.
I'll say yes.
All right. So we had streets E and F. Essentially, streets E and F on the east side of the street is being removed. And so the figures would reflect, the commission wants to see the figures specifically showing the removal of streets E and F on the east side of the commons. We also had a requested change to the live work being permitted with with a use permit. Going back to the first change, the recommendation was to leave in the language and not strike out the change that was proposed in number 1. And then we talked about on 19, the changes to the, with the minor exceptions for private streets in the MDR, changing that to be an exception to where parking areas or alleyways would limit such improvements. There was a discussion about the MDR zone and changing the range from 14 to 30 to 14 to 40. And then a comment regarding the additional designs guidelines. There was the third bullet down where it refers to commercial elements, to strike that bullet out. On the roof lines, or the roof lines bullet, there was a request to add constructed with dimensional roofing material. And we decided, after all, to not incorporate the 10-foot setback. And then in number 24, adding the word policy after goals. So that's, I don't know if there was consensus for all of those, but I can reflect those in an errata change that we can present on the 5th.
There was one other change that I proposed, that is on paragraph 11, to revise table 6.1 to say that the minimum floor area ratio does not apply to multifamily mixed use as well as MDR.
And again, I just want to clarify that the markups to the graphics will be illustrative and not final presentation graphics.
So
we have a motion.
yes, we do have a motion. So the motion is to have this part come back to us on October 5th and to move the, I believe it's the application discussion to the 18th, or the, excuse me, the 19th. That is the motion. Okay, and I think Commissioner Alpert was about to second it.
Actually, I previously seconded it. And
yes,
so
okay.
Now then we had our discussion, so we can move on.
All right, so Ms. Nylander.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote. Thank you. We had mover Commissioner Wallace.
Aye.
Seconder Vice Chair Alpert.
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards.
Aye.
Commissioner Marks.
Aye.
And Chair Kuznick.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
All right. I'm sure you'll all be happy if I take our 5-minute break. Will that be acceptable to all?
Before we close, can I
go ahead, Commissioner
just
Marks,
ask
go ahead.
a question that's not about the plan amendments, but it is pertinent to what we might get on the 19th of October, and I wanted to give the staff a heads up, or at least to raise the point. I have heard that in plan sheet L10, which is the landscape illustrative plan, that the pickleball courts, which show up on our plans, were removed from the park. I heard that from a conversation with some members of the Parks Commission. And I'm wondering, are they still a part of it? Because if they're not, it would be difficult to adopt that plan on the 19th because it does show the pickleball courts. So if the park has changed, if we need a new illustrative landscape plan, please make sure that we get it for the 19th or whenever it is you want us to take a vote. And if it hasn't changed, then fine, we've got it and no need to do anything.
Just for clarification, the City Council will need to adopt the specific plan amendments prior to final action on the entitlements. And so the 19th is an additional discussion to address those issues that were raised at the past meeting. And so we'll take the comment under advisement as well. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further objections, I think we have the opportunity to take a short break here, correct?
Thank you.
How long?
Yes.
All right, so I have 9:19. Will 5 minutes be sufficient?
And if everyone wouldn't mind just muting themselves before
Yes.
they take their break, that'd be great. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. Yes. 5 minutes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, are we all back? All right.
Looks like it.
Thank you. Excellent. So we move on to item 10.1, the study session, Morgan's Homes Townhome Development Plan Concept Review. And we have a staff report from Shanae Tsukamoto.
Thank you, Chair Kuznick and commissioners and the public. Good evening. I would like to summarize the staff report and then followed by the applicant's presentation. So Jen, could you please promote the applicants? And then after the presentation, and the staff and then applicant will respond to your question and concerns. The proposed project is at the Morgan's Masonry Supply store that was established in 1970s and before the city was incorporated in 1983. So it's a long established destination, if you want to say it that way. But the project site is 2.97 acres, and it consists of two parcels. And then let me share the screen so you can see. Here you go. Now you can see the project site at the San Ramon Valley Boulevard and Deerwood Road. So this project proposes a 72-unit townhome development. And then one piece of property here in a wedged shape is not part of this project because that property is owned by somebody else. And the proposed project consists of live-work units along Omega Road and the Deerwood Road. And then also the development architectural massing and the density are not quite meeting the required minimum density, and also massing may be just meeting the minimum requirement with regards to the height of the proposed project. And also the applicant, the way it proposed, the corner here, the San Ramon Valley Boulevard and Deerwood Road is in a specific plan envisioned as a new retail node, but the proposed project does not seem to address that clearly. And also applicant is contemplating the option to amend the specific plan standards so that they can move forward or may be able to move forward with this project. So with that, I will stop sharing this and move on to their PowerPoint presentation. Can you see this, the first screen?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Excellent, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Garrett Hines. I'm the Vice President of Architecture and Design at Trumark Homes. Trumark Homes is based in San Ramon, next to City Center, just about a mile from where you all are tonight at City Hall, I believe. We've been building and developing land in California for over 3 decades. So thank you for allowing this discussion tonight about the Morgan's Masonry site. We have studied the San Ramon Village specific plan in depth and find many great planning goals and intentions. We're not saying that there's anything wrong with the document or it's flawed in any way. We're simply asking to dive a little deeper into the particular site and to share our perspectives as a developer. Trumark Companies is much more than just a home builder. We have various divisions which focus on all development opportunities, including retail, office, and mixed use. Our studies for this site began by reading every word of the village specific plan. Then we attempted to physically design the site with everything asked for, including a minimum of 30 homes per acre, plus a minimum of 0.5 FAR for non-residential use. So this totals, these minimums equal up to 105 residential homes, plus at least 64,000 square feet of non-residential use on a 3-acre site. Next slide, please. Thank you. As you know, the Morgan's Masonry site is one of 3 sites identified as Village Center mixed use at the intersection of San Ramon Boulevard and Deerwood Road. The total minimum uses for these 3 sites would equal 360 dwelling units plus 261,000 square feet of non-residential floor area. Next slide, please. To date, the Rome site on the lower right is approved to bring 169 of those 360 homes, plus 6,000 square feet of commercial. The residential units would equal 37.5 units for the acre on the Rome site, but the non-residential use is far less than what should have been 98,000 square feet. Again, I'm not saying anything is wrong. I'm just pointing out how things can change based on a combination of 2 big things: physical conditions of a site and market conditions. You see, the specific plan was approved last November, yes, but I think it's important to recognize that the task force began their efforts back in 2017. Many things have changed in the last 5 years, such as the demise of brick and mortar retail, as well as the recent swell and work from home situations. These 2 market factors make you ask the question, is non-residential use really the best choice at the Morgan site? The Morgan site has physical constraints similar to the Rome site. Yes, these sites have great traffic and visibility, but without safe and convenient street parking, the sites are forced to add substantial on-site parking facilities to support both residential and non-residential uses. For example, on the Morgan site, the minimum 64,000 square feet of non-residential use would require roughly 320 parking spaces, plus parking for the residential uses of another 200 spaces. That's over 500 parking spaces total on a 3-acre site. I'll admit I didn't attend the Rome hearings, but I must guess that these aggressive program goals were part of that discussion for that site. I don't believe this is the first time you're hearing these concerns for such intensity in this location. Next slide, please. As with the Rome site, reducing the intensity of uses here does not mean we can't achieve many of the great other goals found in the specific plan, such as pedestrian connectivity through the site, buffering to existing uses, strengthening the San Ramon Boulevard corridor and gateway, all of this to catalyze positive change. Next slide, please. Our proposal tonight promotes a solution for today's market needs. Exactly what the architecture looks like isn't important tonight, it's secondary. I'd like the discussion to be about an appropriate program for the Morgan site. To me, what's not appropriate here is up to 105 homes plus 64,000 square feet of commercial plus 500 parking spaces. Just for a little perspective, 500 parking spaces is an entire football field covered in parking 4 stories tall. A whole acre of parking, 4 stories, that's 500 parking spaces. But instead, how about 72 homes at 24 homes to the acre, 10,000 square feet of live work ground floor, home office retail space, and only 200 parking spaces. Yes, this program is less intense, but it matches today's needs and many goals of the specific plan. I also believe it fits a little bit better with your climate action plan for less intensity and less cars. Next slide, please. Do we have every detail figured out tonight? No, of course not. Our vision creates a work from home village with ground floor live work shops fronting all 3 sides, all 3 street frontages, as well as all the internal paseos connecting San Ramon Boulevard to Omega. Existing parallel street parking along San Ramon Boulevard and Omega support less intense non-residential home, office, cottage industries, such as accounting, architecture, interior design, and many other professional endeavors. Next slide, please. Today's retail doesn't necessarily need to be a place to meet, but our current plans work either way. The ground floor live work home offices shown in the red circle here with an integrated front patio would create an active village atmosphere for the site's external edges and interior green belts. Next slide. Businesses can hang a shingle out on front and interact with the community. The village is bustling all day, and in the evening, the residents close shop and live life supporting local restaurants. Next slide, please. The architecture can be contemporary, or we can look at a more traditional design, of course. We chose contemporary so we could promote rooftop decks for added outdoor living and help increase the density to get closer to 30, which is the goal. Our proposal is 24 homes per acre. So many cities today around the Bay Area promote this magic number of 30 homes per acre without fully understanding the huge jump, not just jump in extreme added expense, but 30 homes per acre is also much less popular, which means much less valuable. The difference between 24 homes per acre and 30 homes per acre equals infeasibility. It requires a different construction type, different parking configurations, and simply lives differently. It's a jump from living in a house to living in an apartment. We'd like to build what people want to live in, not a number. Next slide, please. One additional item to point out about the site that Shanae pointed out is the notch in the Morgan's Masonry site, the missing tooth, I call it. This is an auto body shop parcel separate from the Morgan site. We have been actively working with this landowner for 2 years now, but to date have not been able to fully satisfy the landowner. Tonight's discussion hopefully will provide a clear message, allowing our negotiations to proceed. We have designed a site to work around the body shop and be able to slip in the remaining piece. But honestly, I don't think any of us here want to go forward without this piece in play. I will say that a lower density, less intense program will help our ability to negotiate with this landowner. I've seen this before, one landowner controlling the ability or inability to deliver the city dream. If we don't do something, then I'm afraid your gateway, your approved hotel, and the Rome development may all be at risk of moving ahead in the near future. If I had a boutique hotel across the street, I'd have second thoughts about building it next to an active construction material yard with truck activity starting every day at 7 a.m., wouldn't you? Next slide. Next slide, thanks. In closing, we have not provided all the details, not yet. But before going deeper, we'd like to hear your thoughts about this possible adjustment to the specific plan. We'd like to move ahead and provide details for this less intense program, but need to hear your openness and general support to this idea. So specifically, would you support less than 30 homes per acre, somewhere 22 to 27 homes per acre? Basically change this to a multifamily residential category. Number 2, would you support roughly 10,000 square feet of live work retail instead of 64,000 square feet of non-residential? The less intense program would lessen the parking needs again from 500 cars to 200 cars. Finally, and to be clear, we know our request requires a revision to the specific plan and associated approvals. It's not over the counter. We understand that and think it's worth it for all stakeholders. So with that, those are the big questions tonight. Thank you so much. I look forward to your conversation.
Thank you, Garrett. So with that, and also I'd like to clarify one other thing on this proposed concept, and also it's within the San Ramon Village specific plan. There are not conflicting, but 2 ways of calculating the density for this project. One way is to go with a general plan approach for residential density to be calculated based on net project site, where the specific plans calls for gross site area to determine the density. And that is one of the questions to the commission. And then staff is asking your guidance in which direction or which method of density is appropriate. Not only for this, but all for the remaining development potentials in the specific plan, and as well as for the rest of the city.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions the commissioners have before we move on to public comment? Questions clarifying either to the applicant or to staff? Yes, Commissioner Albert.
Thank you. Could you explain what a shopkeeper corner is on the diagram? I've never heard that term.
That's a good question. We see the importance of that corner as a part of the gateway experience, and we want to make sure it's a very appropriate piece of architecture. And so it was just the architects that I hired came up with this shopkeeper kind of corner to give it a more of a retail feel and help set the tone for a live work village atmosphere. Do we have that perfectly figured out? No, but it's a concept.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay. So I think at this time we will see if there is a public comment. We'd like to open public comment for this project.
Great, thank you. We did not receive any written communication. So I'll take a peek here at our attendees list. It looks like we do have a couple of hands up. And then Lauren, if you could put up the timer for me, just as a reminder, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And if you would like to speak, you can click the raise your hand button or *9 on your telephone if you did call in today. All right, so our first speaker is going to be Billy Ferreira. And you can speak whenever you're ready.
Yes, as she said, my name is Billy Ferreira, and my family owns 2241. My grandfather bought the property in the 1920s as a general store and post office. This was sold to the fire department. My father bought the property next door in the 1940s as an automotive repair shop, which has been in use since then. Currently, it is run by his grandson. A strip of land left over from the city trade with Morgan's for Omega was bought by my grandfather's original dirt. We've been in talks with Trumark for over a year and a half, numerous contracts favoring Trumark. We spent thousands in attorney fees to date. Last deal would have cost us $2 million in capital gains, which we can't afford. Trumark went silent several months ago, and the first we heard of the new project was 10 days ago. This does not give us enough time to consult an attorney. Our concerns on this project are our loss of privacy, parking right now. We get several cars a day in our lot that are going to Morgan's. Townhome owners complaining of an auto shop and trying to remove us. This property, which is in its 4th generation, be worth next to nothing if that happened. Loss of security to the shop, fire access to the townhomes, and Trumark states that another plan shows an auto shop, but we have not seen this new version. We strongly oppose and reserve the right to raise further issues once we see a plan and consult with an attorney. Almost the same plan was brought before the Planning Commission years ago, and because of our property being in the middle of the project, it was denied. I thank you very much for your time.
All right, thanks, Billy. Okay, we have another speaker here, a call-in speaker. You could go ahead and speak whenever you're ready. Call-in user 1 is your username.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So recently, Governor Newsom has done away with single-family homes in California. So the next largest property that anyone can own would be townhomes. My question to the developers would be, are they going to restrict how many one particular party can buy of any given project? I currently live in a townhome in San Ramon, and the townhome communities have major blind spots because a lot of the community quality of life is in the hands of the HOA. And the developers, I feel, monopolize initially of a lot of the quality of life of these residents. And so then that renders our city sort of really out of a lot of control on certain issues, such as parking, such as trespassing, security, policing, that sort of thing. So if also for security, I'm always wondering if a foreign government is rich enough, they can possibly come and buy up an entire townhome community. And then they have all these HOA protecting them because they're private property and the city can't do anything about it. Then they can create their own little republic, townhome republic in our city. Then what are you going to do about it? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on, we have Andrea Ferreira. Andrea, you can speak whenever you're ready. You should be able to now.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Carl Ferreira, and I am the son of Billy Ferreira, who spoke earlier. And I just wanted to voice my strong opposition to this plan. That property was my great-grandfather's property, and he had the first post office in the area of San Ramon, and it has been in our family for 4 generations, and we cherish it deeply. It has been an auto shop, and every one of the Ferreira family members has worked on that property, and we have a strong connection to it. And I feel strongly that Trumark is trying to come in and kind of bully us around, you know, and it's really unfortunate because we really are one of the oldest families in the area, and we really embody a lot of the values and traditions of the area. And in one of the slides, I believe, it looked like there was an entrance coming through San Ramon Valley Boulevard onto our property, which would be terrible, honestly. And these people really haven't negotiated with us in good faith. They've been really just trying to find a way to profit as much as they can on the deal. And we were there to try and negotiate in good faith. And I just don't think that they're a good thing for San Ramon, or to really just kind of remove a piece of property in history that has such a strong connection to the area such as ours. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Carl. All right, it looks like that might be our last speaker for public comments.
I agree. And so we will close public comment on this topic.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So discussion amongst commissioners. I know we have a series of questions we've been asked to respond to. Packet page 63 on this. But initial thoughts. Okay. Seeing no hands start, I'm just going to start calling on people. I'm going to start with Commissioner Edwards. Ladies first.
All right. Do you want my general thoughts about the project?
I do.
All right. So I have a number of concerns about this project, and I will say this is my first concept review, so with some luck, I won't speak out of turn. I'm concerned about the density of this project and the height of this project. A reduction in the density to this does not seem to be an appropriate location to be effectively building single family homes. I think that I would like to see some additional density in this particular area. We've got a 60-foot height limit that's permitted in this area. It looks as though you're proposing 35. Given the housing crisis and given the RHNA numbers that we're likely going to have to be satisfying, I would like to see some additional height and some additional density on this particular site. I appreciate the comments that we received about the construction cost considerations. but I do appreciate the comment in the staff report that I would like to see some alternatives. I'd like to understand a little bit better about the other things that you've considered building rather than this kind of project. The live work designation for these projects, I'm not sure that I understand calling these areas live work when it's really simply just working from home. That again, that's a single family home type of use. If you're going to be proposing a live work project, I would expect to see some types of restrictions in terms of what kinds of businesses could be operated from the site, what kinds of deed restrictions you would propose, how enforcement would take place, and so forth. I'd also like to see some affordable housing presented, an affordable housing plan. And I share staff's concern about that corner retail location. And I think that's the start of my comments.
Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Wallace, you're next.
Okay, so I'm trying not to reinvent the wheel here. I agree with Commissioner Edwards about the lack of density. And let me expand upon that a little bit. The plan calls for a certain range of density for a reason, and that is to have a critical mass in the village center mixed use area to have some support for retail. I am not as down on retail as the applicant is. And as I mentioned at our last meeting about a half an hour ago, I think the demise of retail has been overstated, particularly when you consider what the state is imposing on us in terms of building housing units. The last thing we need to do is to build lower density rather than higher density. I was really intrigued by the comment that the plan requires 64,000 square feet of commercial space. I had not seen that. It is not in the staff report. That's the first time I've heard of that. And that would be, I think, roughly half of the entire commercial space we've allocated to the entire area. Now, we have approved townhomes up the street on Deerwood. We have approved the development at San Ramon Apartments across the street. So there is some residential going in there. I know there's another project that's going to come in front of us with additional residential a little bit farther north of Morgan's. So it's not like this area is a graveyard for residential. So I don't think at this point that a case has been made for downsizing the density of the project. I share Commissioner Edwards' concerns about even a statement about affordable housing. It's not that complicated. The 72 unit townhomes would require 11 affordable units that are spread among 3 different income areas. I mean, that's not rocket science to figure out that, but there's not a word in that I've heard from the applicant about how they're going to do that. I'm concerned about the lack of access to the property. And I know that the fire district has expressed some concerns about access to the fire district. Now, as we pointed out in more meetings than I can count, if the applicant can't figure out how to deal with a requirement from the fire district, then the project simply doesn't get built, whether we agree to do it or not. So I would like to see a more dense project. I realize that it's not going to be what you want, which is the size of townhomes for sale that you're proposing. But at this point, it doesn't seem that the concept that you're pitching to us is consistent with what the city wants. And I don't see at this point that it's a very good fit. Now, maybe you can come back with some additional proposals, how it can meet some of those requirements, but you're asking for, think about it, you're asking for us to amend a specific plan we just approved about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a hard bone to chew. So let me leave it at that.
Okay. Commissioner Albert.
Well, I don't think my comments are going to deviate too much to my predecessors. first of all, the specific plan was just approved, not too long ago. And as I recall, throughout the process, I don't recall ever hearing anybody speak in public that it was infeasible to put the kind of project that we had planned at that VCMU corner. So I also am concerned about the very first project in one of the, I think, catalyst corners, reducing the density over what was in the plan, or at least having an opportunity to see alternatives that might meet the plan goals. And at this point, regarding live work, I share Commissioner Edwards' comments. I'm not, like Commissioner Wallace, I think the death of retail is maybe a little bit premature. I think there are opportunities for neighborhood serving retail in that area. There isn't a dry cleaners or a coffee shop or any of the things we discussed through the many months of talking about, even the project across the street at Rome. I also was surprised and would like maybe some clarification on how we backed into 64,000 square foot of retail on that corner. I don't think that was anything we talked about when we developed the plan. Some of the comments from staff, I assume at the next rendition, whether it's parking or whether it's streets or placing C3 requirements, we'll all see those on the next version of what we see here. And then I guess lastly, I share your comment, Mr. Hines, that the project truly doesn't really work with that notch, there. That really makes it really difficult to envision a quality project. And I don't know if you even considered dropping, for instance, building 8, which is, because that'll at least open up that corner for a more robust corner, perhaps of retail, and it just doesn't wrap around the auto shop. But I sincerely hope that at some point the parties all come together and come with a project. Sounds like it got close at one time and then maybe things went sideways. But I'm also concerned about the overall site layout with that notch in the project as well.
Commissioner Marks, your thoughts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My thoughts are pretty much the same as Commissioner Edwards led off with, and that Commissioner Alpert and Wallace joined. But I'd like to explain a little bit why I feel very strongly we need greater density here. We're in the I think unfortunate position as a city that the state keeps requiring us to add more units and limiting our ability to design those units. And the beauty of the Crow Canyon specific plan, which is now called the San Ramon Village Plan, was that it was away from existing neighborhoods, that we could have either more flexibility to go with density, or even if we had less flexibility, we had the ability to meet our RHNA numbers without imposing on neighborhood shopping centers and converting them to something else, or if there were a vacant lot somewhere, putting density on that. And the more we downsize in this area, as I said in our last review a few hours ago, the more we have to increase elsewhere and put more pressure on shopping centers and other land uses. You may be right about the market, but I haven't been convinced that retail can't be placed in these kinds of projects. In fact, over the weekend, I believe I read about one in Fremont, where there is a mixed-use project, and they got a food service to go in, some kind of beauty salon or whatever, which is neighborhood serving, and another use. It's not going to be large-scale retail, but it's going to be neighborhood serving. To the extent that we downsize in this particular area, we damage the prospects of other properties. We damage the prospect of bringing in a population that can support retail, that could support a renovation of the shopping center that's just attached to or right next door to Morgan's Masonry. It just seems that we don't have enough evidence at this point that our plan won't work over the long haul. And I'm pretty convinced that by downscaling this area, we damage what we were trying to create and our chances of preserving what we were trying to preserve. Like my colleagues, I picked up on the fire department's comments, and certainly that's either a showstopper or something you can work through with the fire department. But there were also comments from the engineering division about the abandonment of easements. And that triggered a memory about the Rome Corporation project, which is right across the street, where only toward the end of that project did we find out that what was partially driving, in fact, largely driving the layout of that site was an easement that we only sort of lately in the process were made aware of. I would like, if you do come back, that on a separate site plan, you show us where the easements are and how they may be affecting your property. Certainly, preliminary real estate analysis would show that. But by and large, this is just not the place for that low scale of project. If we didn't have the state towering over us with these requirements, it would still not be the place, because there's such a housing crisis in the Bay Area that every city on every property where they can put housing and not do damage to other land uses is, I think, ethically obligated to do that. So I appreciate your effort, and I certainly have no axe to grind with your trying, but it just doesn't seem to fit in with what we need here in Foster City, in San Ramon. That was a slip of the tongue from the past. In any event, I'm willing to take a look at other ideas that you may have. I was not particularly enamored of the architecture. I know you didn't want us to focus on that, but you talked about a more traditional view. What you put forward is kind of too boxy for me. I would like something that, especially if it comes in more dense, that actually has a roof, actually has some traditional elements to it. Because in my mind, that's what I would like to see in the overall district. But I'm willing to take a look at photographs of anything that you think might have some applicability, and go from there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. And just to, I know that you want to respond to us, but I have my last comments, and while my voice is still good here. I'd have to say that I also agree with this issue of the density. We have been actually, lucky enough to have seen recently a number of projects come before us in which we have approved, and I have to say that I thought they look really good, and they are really dense, and I think that that kind of shows us that there are ways to make this work and make it both affordable and addressing our needs for housing in our area. I do think that this particular location, while I would be sorry to see it not be a retail center, because I know that as a business, it is quite a significant generator of sales tax for the city. But on this location, you could put in a sizable number of houses, and I don't think people would react to it poorly, because it is closer to a busy street. There's, across the street, there's a lot of or a number of fast food places. So I think the feel of that area could well tolerate greater density and maybe families really starting out and not looking for an expansive or quite the need for elbow room as we might have as we get older and our children, if there are children and they get bigger and they need more room. But this would be a good spot for that starter home and for families, getting their foot in the door to home ownership in our area. And I think that's a good spot for it. I also like the idea that we still do need some retail. I mean, laugh all you want, but that's a good corner for a 7-Eleven. Something along those lines. And yes, the dry cleaners, the nail salons, the haircut place, all those things that we didn't get to attend to, Starbucks, during the pandemic. And we realized we really did need all those little places. So there's that. I kind of agree with Commissioner Marks. My style of architecture, I'm not a big fan of what is modern, but then again, I'm not modern. So that's that part of it. The live work thing, I'm going to agree with Commissioner Edwards on this. Calling the bottom level of a townhouse, your office as a live workspace is a bit of a stretch for the imagination. I mean, no, it's not stretching the imagination, but I think that is taking some allowances for the retail on the bottom level and residential above it. There are so many places, if you just are around our neighbor towns, that have pretty vibrant downstairs and live spaces above it. I think San Ramon can do this, and I have every confidence that we can, and that this is a good area. That part of as we were developing the specific plan, that this is what we had in mind, that this would be a good spot. So I like to see the density numbers stay according to the specific plan. And I think, I actually think that the market would support a more dense townhome project on that lot. I look forward to you solving the problem of the reluctant neighbor, and hope that they are also able to, reach a suitable agreement with the proposal. So those were the 5 questions, more or less. I think you've heard from all of us. Mr. Park.
Just one point of clarification. Could you just clarify or speak to the intention of the specific plan to use the gross density for calculation as opposed to other definitions that net out non-exclusive easements and the like? Again, the gross use of gross area for density results in a higher density requirement in this case, and this is unique to the specific plan. And again, we're just wanting to make sure that we're clear that that is the intention of the commission in adopting this plan, as opposed to an inconsistency between general plan and the specific plan.
So is your question to us as commissioners or to the applicant? I'm sorry.
It's to the commission because, again, the specific plan calls for the use of gross area in the calculation of density. And by the use of gross, it does not allow the elimination of non-exclusive easements and some other things, which results in higher densities being applied. And again, that's not the same standard that's used elsewhere in the city. And we'll talk about it again in the next item as well. But again, I just want to make sure that the staff is clear that that was the intention of the commission in adopting the specific plan, that it be a more conservative approach that results in higher density numbers.
Do my fellow commissioners have thoughts to weigh in on this? It would strike me that we worked really hard when we put the plan together. So go ahead, Commissioner Marks.
This is really a question to Lauren. Using gross acreage yields a higher, the overall gross acreage, irrespective of any limitations, will yield a higher density, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Higher number of units.
Right. And that's really what you are asking us, is if you want the higher number of units, you go with gross acreage. If you want a lower density, you net out items 1 through 4 in the next staff report, and any other unbuildable portion of the property that may be restricted by some outside agency or an easement or something like that.
Right. And the gross essentially allows you to reconfigure that density on a site in the event there were unbuildable portions, but you're still required to address that density through a development proposal.
Let me ask you a question. If we were not in this specific plan area, but say just in another portion of the city covered by the general plan, what would we be doing? How would we do it?
Again, it nets out non-exclusive easements, which could include roadways and utility easements that are not within the control. It could also be, access easements, EVAs, that sort of thing. And so the result of it is there's less area to make the calculation of density on. And so again, it's really not a question of unbuildable lands. That's a different discussion that we'll have. But it's a question of intention in terms of the density ranges that we want to accomplish. And right now, the only thing that gets netted out is street dedication.
Well, for my money, for whatever it's worth, and maybe as a starting point, again, I believe this needs to be a high density neighborhood, and whatever formula gets us the greater number of units, that is the formula that I would like us to use in this area. And again, I say that because this is one of the areas where we can help meet some of our RENA requirements without having to do any damage to or upset any existing neighborhoods.
And I can say that aligns with the adoption of the specific plan as written.
Thank you. Commissioner Alpert.
Maybe it's a question for Lauren. Are there any implications of changing the density that we need to be aware of as it relates to state law or freezing a development standard at a point of time? And I'll preface that I think the getting the definition consistent across the city is a good thing. But my question is, in this case, are we accidentally doing something we probably ought not to with making changes for the specific plan right now?
I don't think so. The issue of density is going to be widely discussed as part of the housing element update, because we're going to be looking at housing opportunity sites and having to do projections of yield to address the RENA allocations. And so this whole discussion of density will get revisited through that process. And if there are inconsistencies in how we're treating density, we can have policy discussions about that. In the case of the specific plan, you have a unique set of standards and a unique vision. So I don't think there's any inconsistency with holding a specific plan to a specific standard.
Okay. And just to make sure I follow you, there are no concerns related to the specific plans adopted, and because we're only doing a concept review, could there be issues with changing the standard in the specific plan given other development applications are already pending, or are there any unintended consequences of us making a change?
Again, it's a concept review. You're not actually proposing a change. It would require a specific plan amendment to physically change the gross standard that's called out in the plan. This is really more for staff's understanding and making sure that we're clear on the intention of the specific plan and the density calculations going forward, because we have other applications within the specific plan and within the city, as we'll talk about with the next concept review.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. So I think we have given you some feedback on this then.
Yeah, no, I think we're clear.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. All right. So I think at this point, the next step is what we have for staff on this topic, correct?
Yeah.
I'll check what we've been asked to do here.
And I'll just clarify to the public, the concept review process ends with the comments from the Planning Commission. There's no additional hearings or actions associated with the concept review application. This is really just for feedback to the property owner and an opportunity for them to float their ideas.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So thank you very much. Hope this has been instructional and informative for you.
No, can I just say thank you very much. I sincerely hope your comments tonight are heard by others and that we end up with a successful catalyst gateway per your specific plan, for your goals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are back on the agenda, and I believe we are on the last item. Well, almost, no, just the next item. Item 10.2, Trumark Homes Townhome Development Plan Concept Review. So another concept review. And Shanae, you have the same, you're up again.
Yes, I am, once again, but in the same applicant, but different location.
Okay.
This is at the Deerwood Drive, 2481. It is currently occupied by office building, 51,000 square foot building, was approved and built in 1986. And this building was designed for a digital data management facility in which did not really require any people being there. So little parking lot being developed on this property. And once again, the Trumark is proposing to as a concept to build a 35-unit townhome development. And in the dense property itself, the size is 4.43 acres, but the applicant is requesting on this case, because there's no specific plan associated with this particular location. So general plan and zoning would apply. And in this case, we could use the general plan's density calculation as a net calculation. And the applicant is requesting to consider netting out 1.82 acres located in the south side of the property. It's because that is on the steep side and it's rather difficult to develop. So, oh shoot, I lost my.
Just a quick clarification, it's 53-unit townhome.
Did I say something else?
You said 35.
Oh, sorry. Oh. Let me share the screen here. Here you go. Now, do you see the proposed site plan here? And Deerwood Road on the north side here, the Crow Canyon, it's not shown here, but in just south side of it. Now, with that, I'd like to ask Garrett to present the project, and then we can respond to your comments.
Excellent.
So just a moment. This one.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you for a chance to discuss a land use change opportunity site in our mind. There we go. This site recently became available and the property owners wish to sell today. Due to it being surrounded by residential uses, we thought it may be considered to change from its current OA administrative office land use to RM medium density residential land use. But before considering a land use change, our office division studied the facility for a potential reuse and determined that it's not an ideal office due, as Shanae said, to lack of parking to support a marketable office in today's office climate. The building was designed for servers and power sources and very few employees. The current parking doesn't match today's Class A office needs. The building has been vacant for over a year. Therefore, we felt compelled to start this discussion with staff who acknowledged that with further study, maybe it's an opportunity for residential use. We all know there are many things to study, such as traffic, creek setbacks, developable versus non-developable areas of the site, utility capabilities, all that stuff will be a second tier study. But today, in general, the conversation is this a potential residential use site? And before I go further, I want to make sure that everybody knows Trumark's proposing a residential use, which comes with meeting your affordable housing ordinance, just like we would have proposed for Morgan. So we're not trying to get out of anything. Affordable housing, working with the fire marshal, all of that is standard approach when we get to that level. So next slide, please. I'd like to take a minute to point out some of the basic things I noticed looking at the site. First of all, the surrounding uses and edge conditions. The next site, please. To the west, we have 3-story apartment flats. You'll notice they're built very close to the property line, I believe, to maximize the upper flat area of the site for density. Parking for these homes is a combination of 1-car garages on the ground level with living on the 2nd and 3rd levels, mixed with carports. There are no driveway aprons. Guest parking is arranged on the site with open parking stalls. This style of home usually gets about 25 homes to do. This one right here. Okay, next slide, please.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. To the east, we have 2-story single-family homes attached in duets, triplexes, and fourplex, like townhomes. These homes back up to the east property line with backyards. These homes have full-length driveway aprons and all 2-car side-by-side garages. This style of building generally yields about 12 homes per acre. Next slide. To the north, there are 2-story single-family homes on approximate 4,000 square foot lots set above Deerwood Drive. 4,000 square foot lots generally get about 6 homes per acre. So next slide, please. To summarize, this site is surrounded by 3 different residential densities and building configurations. What we are proposing is a 4th style to complement these 3 that you already have. Again, the row townhome. It's a transitional density with family-oriented floor plans. I'm not asking for a high rise. I don't think that would blend into the existing fabric in this area. I'm asking for a home type that would blend and complement with what's there today. So next slide shows a blow up of your general plan and shows how the land uses are. This site is the yellow star, is surrounded by multiple family, high density, 14 to 30 DU per acre residential land uses. That's what's in the area. Those are our neighbors. The next slide shows, just like to the sites to our east and our west, the site is constrained by a very steep wooded slope bank that slopes down to a creek feature along Crow Canyon. That's the blue line is generally where the creek is. As mentioned before, many reports would be produced, including hydrology, arborist biology, to properly determine the creek structural setback, which is what happened to the east and west sites. You can't develop within a creek structural setback. Thus, the developable area is reduced, as shown here, 2.6 acres of flat area where the building is, and then 1.8 acres is undevelopable and would be remain in perpetuity as beautiful woodland and creek slope bank. Next slide, please. So Trumark is proposing 53 family-oriented attached row townhomes. This is just a first pass layout, yet to be vetted thoroughly by staff, engineering, fire. Everybody would get to go through this, and we would do everything we can to make it perfect to everybody. Life safety being #1 priority, of course. 53 homes on 2.6 acres is generally about 19 homes per acre. This layout hides 2-car garages in the rear of the units, so not to be seen from the public realm along Deerwood Drive. An internal linear park would provide a protected place for residents to gather, barbecue, get to know your neighbors. The southern edge would have a common green belt, in my opinion, to allow all residents to stroll along this edge and take in the terrific distant views of the San Ramon Valley. Next slide, please. Instead of contemporary architecture, I think this site really lends itself to more traditional architecture. And the final elevation style, of course, is yet to be determined. Due to the terrific valley views, we've been considering rooftop decks, but maybe not. And again, we would understand the usual desire to blend with the context surrounding other architectural styles in the neighborhood. So Monticello, California Spanish, prairie, farmhouse, all things that would help blend and say San Ramon. Next slide, please. At the end of the day, we see this again as a transitional residential density land use, transitionally connecting densities from 4 to 25 homes per acre in its immediate vicinity, blending and complementing the surrounding uses. We're asking you one big question tonight. Could you support a land use change from administrative office to medium density residential? Let's be perfectly clear. This land use change requires a general plan amendment and zone change, and the formal public review process that I just witnessed for 2 hours earlier. We're ready to take this on, and we're ready to start now. We understand you have a general plan update beginning next year, but we don't have 2 years to wait. Then start a development plan 2 years from now. The opportunity is here today. We need to start the general plan amendment process right now. There's no reason we can't work together with staff in a concurrent process and end up in the same place 2 years, just 2 years faster. Waiting 2 years for a general plan update just pushes this opportunity out 2 more years. 2 more years with a vacant building, which by the way has a 2,000-gallon diesel tank next to all these homes. Imagine you want to sell your home and move to San Sebastian, Spain, or wherever, but you can't, but someone tells you, sorry, we need 2 years to study the site. So you're just going to have to stay put. That's not really fair to the landowner. My point is we can study and process the site in parallel with your active general plan amendment that's scheduled to start next year. We'd like to start sooner. Thanks again for your time. What do you think? Can you support this land use change and starting this process today? Thank you.
Thank you. So any questions or
Questions for
to
staff or the applicant at this time? And before we move on to public comment. Anyone? All right, so let's go on to see if there is public comment. We will open public comment on this concept review.
Thanks, Chair Kuznick. If you'd like to speak, feel free to raise your hand or press the *9 button on your telephone if you're calling in. And I currently don't see anyone. We'll give it a little bit longer just to see if anyone pops up. All right, I don't see any hands.
I agree. And so let us close the public hearing portion of this. And now we have comments and discussion from commissioners. We have the questions that are on packet page 94 that we've been asked to consider. So if someone would like to start. Oh, yes, Commissioner Wallace.
As the staff report recognizes, we had a concept review back in 2017. I remember the concept review because I went out to the property and walked around, not only that the property, but the neighboring homes and apartments as well. And at that time, the commission was generally supportive of changing the designation from office to residential. The problem we all had, or at least some of us, was that the 19 units they were proposing on that site wasn't dense enough. So I went back out there this morning, and guess what? The apartments are still there. The townhomes next to it are still there, and the homes across the street are still there. So in terms of does residential fit on that piece of property? Yes, it does. I mean, to me, that is the best and highest use for that piece of property. It fills in a hole in that entire area. And you're correct about the view. It's a beautiful view from up there. With respect to the 1.82 acres, that's absolutely undevelopable. I mean, the slope there, even if you could, the slope is so steep, it's wooded. The environmentalists would be out with pitchforks and torches if you even talked about building on that downslope. So all you really have is the 2.6 acres on top, and the good thing is that it is really flat up there. So I am supportive of the idea of turning it into housing. In terms of the question we were asked about the use of the general plan, I mean, this is clearly a place where a big chunk of the property, almost half of it, is clearly undevelopable. And so what I think needs to be done is, you know, the 53 townhomes, I think, is a reasonable number for that 2.6 acres. That's really basically 20 units per acre up there. And that's consistent with the homes, the other developments around it. It's sort of at the upper end, not quite the top, but pretty close to the upper end. So I think it's an efficient use of space. In terms of the zoning, though, I would tend to think that with the 2.6 developable acres, you're really talking about medium high density rather than medium density, 14 to 22 units per acre, not 6 to 14. So in terms of making a change in it, I mean, I think that's where it really should be. In terms of waiting till the general plan update, I don't think that's really necessary at this time. I mean, this project came in front of us 4.5 years ago, and we all came to pretty much the same conclusion. Just at that time, it wasn't the right project. And I don't see a reason to kick the can down the road for another 2 years for one piece of property that I suspect most of us on the commission thinks is appropriate for conversion from commercial to residential. In terms of answering the questions that staff posed on page 94 of the packet, the answer to question number 1, yes. Question number 2, yes, but I think it should be multiple family high density, not medium density. The site layout, I'm waiting to be open on that because I think there's some issues with the fire department again on that. The linear park, I didn't realize that you had one till you mentioned it, till it was mentioned on the application side. So now I understand what you're talking about, and because one of the things that struck me is when we have developments of this size, our natural tendency is to say, where is the meeting area? Sometimes it's euphemistically referred to as a dot lot, but some general public meeting place. But it seems that you have it in there and that. Architectural styles, I'm glad that you showed us something that wasn't boxy. I am, like our chairperson, more traditional than nouveau style. So I think the traditional style would go much better with the other dwellings that are near you, as specifically the townhomes and the houses. I mean, the apartments, they're apartments. There's not much you can say about them except they're apartments. But if you look at the architecture on the homes and the townhomes, something that is consistent with or not glaringly different from those seems to me to be appropriate. And frankly, that's probably a better sell than do some of the boxy ones, nothing personal, but the ones you showed us on Morgan Masonry. So those are my off the cuff comments.
Thank you.
Commissioner Marks, you've moved up in the queue here.
Thank you. I actually agree with a lot of what Eric said. My recollection of when this came before us some years ago was additionally that converting what could be office space or a different office use to housing didn't seem like a good idea at that time. But the world has changed. And I believe, in fact, this would be a good use on that property. And I don't have a problem with the density that you are proposing. I do believe that, and this is a concept plan, so this may be an unfair comment, but I would like to see some staggering of the units rather than just the linear, placement one by one by one. But you'll get to that point, and I'm sure you can handle that. I think everything about this makes sense, except, and this is a comment I made on the last project, the architecture is killing me. I too am more of a traditional, and you showed a picture of something that was interesting. It was a 3-level project, and the first level looked like it had craftsman style columns. I wonder if that could be placed up there again.
Yeah, that is Sorry, Shanae, that is slide.
Yeah, it's there right now.
10, slide number 10. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm not trying to say that's the architecture, but at the ground level, you're starting to do something that appeals to me. It's a traditional form. It can have a more traditional type roof. I don't want you to necessarily make it something that you see everywhere, but much more contextual. Much more contextual is important to me. This is an existing neighborhood. The neighbors are sensitive, and I think rightly so. And I just have the sense that you'd be able to put in something that just fits in on that property. So I'm generally supportive. I'm generally supportive of general plan change. Speaking as a former staffer, I know that when these things happen and they're out of sync with the work program that staff may have in mind, there's a real strain on the staff in terms of can they get all that done given everything else on their plate. And so I would hope that you would be willing to do whatever it takes in terms of bringing consultants on board to help the staff process this in an expeditious way. Timing is important to you, but they've got a boatload of things to do. And I think there needs to be a meeting of the minds here.
Excellent.
Commissioner Edwards or Albert, thoughts?
Sure, I'm happy to share some thoughts. I'm also generally in favor of the concept here. I concur with Commissioner Wallace and Marks about the ability to move forward with the general plan amendment without needing to wait. And I also agree with Commissioner Marks' comments about staggering the units to create a more visually interesting site plan. For my part, I think I'd actually like to see some additional density on the site beyond what you've proposed. It looks as though the adjacent apartment project is about the same height as what you've proposed. So this would seem like a good opportunity to perhaps add a fourth story to the building and the additional units that come with it. Whether you could do that via a townhome project or condos or apartments is up to you. I think there's a lot of different opportunities. The other thing I wanted to just point out is, given that there's a large apartment complex next door, this may be a very good opportunity to be treating the inclusionary zoning ordinance as a floor and not a ceiling. This might be one of those sites where you could actually increase the amount of affordability that you have for a project like this. I did like your suggestion about rooftop decks, particularly on a site like this that has outstanding views. Given the restrictions on the size of the site, I think you don't have a lot of opportunities for private outdoor space for families that are going to be residing here. So I like the rooftop deck concept. I'm not clear whether you propose to actually do something with the open space or whether it gets left in its natural state. If you move forward, I'd like to understand that a little bit better. And then we have the immediate question about the density calculation. I do tend to agree that areas of the site that are not buildable should not be factored in to the density that's required on the lot. And those are my comments.
Thank you.
Mr. Albert.
I think, not to be redundant, I think I recall the last time we saw the project here, and I remember, we generally thought housing was a good opportunity site here. I think our concern before was the nature of the housing project, and I think we were concerned it wasn't compatible with the neighborhood, and I think what you're proposing is. So, and like others, the open space at the Crow Canyon side of the project is clearly not developable. So I think the proposal to exclude that makes a lot of sense. A minor suggestion, the current office space appeared to have built a deck overlooking the open space. And so if that could be incorporated into a future project and something similar, I think that might, be some place to put open space into the project and a little bit there because it is a gorgeous view. And if you don't happen to be on the unit on the hillside, you'll never get a chance to experience it. So it's something to consider as a minor site layout. Rezoning from office to housing, like others, I'm in favor of it, and I'm also in favor of doing it sooner versus later. It appears that Trumark's pretty anxious to move forward with the project, and there's a chance that we could be under construction if now versus waiting 2 years to get started. So I appreciate your enthusiasm to get started, and I think Commissioner Marks made some suggestions on to help alleviate the staff workload. As far as the layout itself, I think there are enough comments from either engineering or the design review that this probably isn't the final layout. So, I think once those comments get baked into the plan, then it'll probably be more appropriate to have a comment about it. But I think, and I trust that your comment that said all those will get resolved as secondary issues after it's an agreement to do housing. Architecture, I was really pleased to see the pictures you put up, because the pictures that were in our staff report were only boxy, and so the ones you showed tonight on the slide were much more what I was thinking. And I actually visited Trumark's website and saw a couple of projects you've done that I thought I was going to recommend that, something more like that. And I'll just say them since I went to the trouble. The Chino Hills Bristol project and the Morgan Hill Jasper project both have a much more residential feel to them. And they're not too dissimilar to some of the pictures you put up in the slideshow as well tonight. So I think I appreciate those styles more than the ultra modern, especially in the neighborhood where we're talking about today. I think that's my comments, and thank you again for spending tonight with us.
Thank you.
I'll keep my comments as brief as I can. And I have to say that I concur with my fellow commissioners. I like that this would become housing. I think the only comment that I would add that hasn't been, and I know this is really not the time for it, but I just want to make sure that as we go forward, or if it goes forward, that the issue of safety to that very steep slope, is addressed, because if you were having families live there, that would be of major concern.
Agreed.
In my mind, going forward. That wasn't the question you asked, but I do think this is a great opportunity to put housing with housing, and opportunity for our density to go forward. And I think you've heard most of us say that sooner is better than later. So I like that. I think it is possible to solve the fire access, and you guys are smart and you'll figure it out between what you propose and what staff can give you feedback on it. So I hope that has given you a sufficient feedback. This was a concept review, and you did want to get our feedback from it. So I think that is wraps it up, unless anyone has any additional comments for this project. All right, seeing no one. So thank you again. And it'll be interesting to see the next steps. So
excellent. All right.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving on to item 11, non-public hearing. There are none. Excuse me. Item 12, study session or commissioner liaison reports. So do we have some reports from commissioners? Open space, parks, EDAC. I went to transportation. So, okay. Eric, you're up first.
Yeah, I went to the Open Space Committee meeting last week. They had a general plan update by Ms. Yee, told them more about general plan updates than they ever wanted to know. A second, Ms. Poon gave a lecture on the Brown Act and how to avoid it that everybody listened to attentively. The third is that they have a series of fall outdoor hikes. The first one was earlier this month that went through my neighborhood. They're having one in the middle of October that's going by Doherty Valley High, and they're currently hoping to have one in mid-November. A large part of the meeting was talking about the upcoming open space plan. Short version is the Open Space Committee would like to figure out how to acquire rights to property on the hillsides of San Ramon to keep them from being developed. And so they have a formula, a matrix, which ones are more important than others. The one thing they never talked about in any of the meetings was how much money they have to do anything with them. I suspect that one of the meetings, someone's going to get around to mentioning that. So they are a very active committee. They are very interested in planning. So I would suspect that they're going to participate in some of the outreach groups for our general plan update. So anyway, that's the Open Space Committee.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Marks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On September the 8th, I attended the Parks and Community Services Commission meeting. And the main topic of discussion was the tennis court reservation pilot program, which was a 6-month program that began April the 1st and continued through. It is a no-fee online registration reservation application regarding 2 of the city's courts at Rancho San Ramon and Central Park. And in general, the staff felt it was not only successful, but they now hope to expand it to cover other tennis courts that are in the city. The next item on the agenda was a really interesting program to get public art out in the community. It was called Upscale Your Heart Out, which I don't understand why that was the title, but that was the title. And what they do is they plan to use old campaign election campaign signs, spruce them up, paint them, and then let young people paint various pictures and distribute it throughout the city, or at least initially in certain locations. It seemed like a pretty interesting idea. They had some enthusiastic support from people that were interested in participating in it. So stay tuned. As you drive around the city, you may see a campaign sign that on one side is public art and the other that says vote for whoever. And then there was a Parks, Trails, Open Space, Master Plan Annual Progress Update Report for year 1 of a 10-year program in which the staff advised the Parks Commission regarding the master plan for those items. And that was it.
Very good. Thank you so much. Commissioner Alpert.
Okay. Well, on September the 8th, Commissioner Edwards and I attended EDAC, and the topic for EDAC that night was a presentation from Cindy Yee on the general plan update. And it was a good primer for the process, all things housing, everything from RENA to ADUs to what counts or doesn't count. And that triggered a pretty healthy, lengthy discussion, mostly for education by the EDAC committee on the housing update and the general plan update, and a little bit even about economic development mixed in. So that was EDAC. And then the next day I attended the Architecture Review Board, and they had 3 things to discuss. The Golden Skate was a review by the architects of a proposal to build 47 townhomes in 8 different buildings on that site. And the way that project is proposing, at least at this point, to meet the inclusionary housing ordinances by the use of junior ADUs inside the project. And then the second project they reviewed was an architect review of Belmont Village. Belmont Village, as you recall, is the residential care facility going in across the street from City Hall. So they had a really pretty thorough discussion about that. And then the third item they discussed was Laborers Camp is planning to remodel and reface and redecorate some of their buildings. And they came before the architects to get feedback on what they should do and shouldn't do. And they did an amazingly thorough job discussing this project, given we will never see it. You know, in order to get to those buildings, you have to pass through locked gates and fences and things like that. But they did their usual thorough job, and that project actually will not come before us. As of now, it'll be a zoning administrator decision, you know, on the approval for that project.
Interesting description of it, Chair or Vice Chair Alpert. And I attended the Transportation Advisory Committee, and we also heard about the housing update from Ms. Yee. Girl has gotten around, and she must be exhausted. So the other part was we got updates on the measures for permit parking up at Mirabella and Travari. Very in-depth analysis of the history of that. And the short end of the story is the permit parking is working great. And the people in Travari are so happy, and the street sweeper can get in and clean their streets, and it's going really well. And so it will be likely, they gave it a year as a pilot program, so they're likely going to ask City Council to renew it. They're also looking at traffic issues associated on Bollinger Canyon Road as it relates to Twin Creek School. And they're very concerned that the safety of kids crossing the street, especially in light of what happened up in Lafayette where the crossing guard was killed. And so I think there's a heightened awareness of that. There was a discussion of the, I can't remember if it's the traffics or the safe routes, but basically when school shut down, there were no buses. And so that program was on a hiatus, and they're getting it back up again. And that was the gist of what we reviewed for the traffic, the Transportation Committee. So that is, anybody else? Any more reports? No? Okay, excellent. All right. Mr. Barr, you're up.
All right. As you're aware, October 5th, we will be coming back with errata on the North Camino Ramon specific plan edits. Additionally, on the 19th, there will be a joint public hearing with City Council related, I should say, a joint study session related to the general plan update and sort of a recap of some of the outreach efforts and where we're headed. Also, there will be a regular meeting of the Planning Commission on the 19th at 7 p.m. that will deal with the entitlements of Bishop Branch 6, as you're aware. So we have a busy schedule. There are a few other pending applications that we're not quite sure which states they're going to fall on. So we'll let you know as they materialize. So that's what I have for now.
Great. All right. Well, we have been a very active group. I think we just made it under the 11 p.m. Provision. So at this point, unless there are any other items, and for the good of the order, thank you for you guys who helped me out in taking care of my cold. Thank you, Vice Chair Alpert, for filling in. But I am going to adjourn the meeting at 10:54. Good night.